Everybody knows Amy Johnson and Paula Gravel.
Nice to see you all. I guess Amy Johnson from the Maine Education Policy Research Institute.
No.
You talk. I'll.
Okay.
He's
a little wiggly. It's okay.
Is it? That goes out there.
yeah, but it came a little bit.
Okay.
And we are here to talk about what we have been up to for the last 18 months.
Wow, seems like a day.
Is that a clicker?
No, I'm the color.
Oh, I'm so just saying.
Just
Mike.
hit me on the head.
Okay, so Paul and I'm usually here on time, and we can refresh ourselves on who's doing what, but I'm starting.
Unless you want me to, let you breathe.
Okay. No, we're good. You'll have plenty of chances to jump in. So yes, we're here, as many of you may already know, due to a legislative directive last year, LD 318, directing MEPRI and the Department of Education to work together to model some very specific changes to EPS. The core goals that came out of the legislature were to look at two sort of things: updating EPS for 2025, where we're at today, 2026 now, and also looking at some different ways to looking at the way that we allocate subsidy to schools and try to tweak that in a way that would achieve more equity in their language. Fairness is the word I'm trying to use.
In other words, to maybe look at including some poverty measure in the distribution section of the formula.
Yeah, specifically trying to look at fairness in terms of the economic ability of different towns to contribute to their town's education. So these are coming out and building on top of another big report that we did from LD 2286 the prior year. There's a big June 2025 report on the MEPRI website. I have a copy here if you want to see it. And so this work we're talking about today came out of the prior year's work, looking a little bit bigger at all aspects of EPS and kind of pinpointing some areas that we thought needed some additional work.
Oh, sorry.
Almost. And the reason this is a joint effort here is that this was really a collaboration between MEPRI doing some of the analysis, the department doing some of the analysis, and a lot of back and forth, a lot of joint meetings of both of our teams.
Some fun, some not so fun, a little arguing, a little accepting, and a little compromise.
And I think a lot of consensus at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what Paul has presented today are estimates. We want to mention this as many times as possible. When the initial work was done, the report that's on the MEPRI website, what we had available was all the inputs and parameters from fiscal year 26, because this work was done last fall. So a lot of work, a lot of simulations around what would have happened in fiscal year 26. Paula then, as soon as your ED 279s were out, reran a lot of these things based on the fiscal year 27 inputs. So that's what we're presenting today.
And before we go any further, no, FY27 calculations will not change. No matter what, I will, if I have to stand in front of the legislature and say, no, 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 I will. 27 is set, and it's not changing. Move forward with your budgets. However, if any changes come as a result of this report, the plan is that they would take effect for the FY28 calculations, which we start in a few months. So let's get ready. By the way, this roadshow we've been doing for a while, so we're getting pretty good at it.
Well, don't put the expectations. Now we're ready.
Now we're ready.
I'll turn back and look at the slide. Okay, so what does this not look at, right? We were within the scope of 318. What EPS and any changes to EPS will not fix, as you know. Spending per pupil is different from the EPS allocation per pupil. And so this is a slide there for most audiences. I think this is a little redundant for you guys, but it's really important that EPS is a reasonable estimate, right? Because that's all that this is equalizing to, is just that minimum floor. As you know, EPS does not direct your spending patterns, does not direct your budgets, does not prevent you from raising more locally. So we have 4 recommendations we're talking about here today. It turns out that really 2 of them are likely to move forward. This is the first time we've given this presentation post LD 2226, so we'll give some updates about that along the way. The first is looking at the regional adjustment, and headline alert, bringing the floor up to 1. The second is this idea of incorporating community poverty into how we determine ability to pay and what the local share should be. The third are some recommendations around areas of the model that we, in our analysis, found to be too low. Other areas in addition to number one. And then the fourth separate category is around special education. Why don't you talk?
Sure.
I am out of breath.
Let me talk. I love to talk. And this is my favorite. And here's why. In the 15 years that I've been at the Department of Education working in the formula, this has never been updated. It is past due. It needs to be updated. And I love the correction that MEPRI has brought to the table. The simulations that I've done using it, help everybody, except for one little area. I'll talk about that. So the proposal is for the regional index, which as all of you know, we're talking page 1, we're talking EPS calculation, EPS rate calculation, which is the multiplier on page 2. Extremely important rate. The regional index works with the fact that the salaries that we use in the funding model for those 8 staffing positions, remember, this is not special ed on page 1. This is, what is the approximate cost in your SAU to operate a classroom, so classroom level for general education. This isn't your overhead, this isn't your transportation, this isn't special ed, this isn't construction, this is just general education calculation for those that are literally sitting in a seat in classrooms in your SAU. None that you've sent out, none that you tuition for. That's what this is determining, okay? So the staffing levels, your teachers, your ed techs, etc., that's what they're for. And those are all based on how many attending students do you have. So that page 1 is attending students. They're actually in seats in your classroom. Whether you pay subsidy or you collect tuition, they're there, okay? So the staffing levels that are, all of you submit your accounts and we say, okay, EPS is going to fund this many teachers according to that many students. Doesn't mean you should have more or less. You have how many you need. I can't tell you that. I've never been a teacher in a public school. Do teach Sunday school, but that's very different. So I can't tell you how many teachers you need or how many ed techs you need. That has nothing to do with this formula. The formula, based on years of research, determined what is an adequate level of staffing for everyone based on also an average salary scale. Average salary scale. So we're using an average salary for teachers that we increase every year based on inflation, and every now and then we bump it up based on looking at actual salaries that you're all paying. But also something else that happened over the last 15 years is the salaries, all of a sudden the state said, hey, wait, you are not paying your teachers enough. We're going to do minimum salaries. You have to pay them at least $30,000. Well, that was a number of years ago, I forget. Then, not too long ago, 2019, maybe, they said, okay, $40,000 is the new minimum. And so now you have to do 40. Well, so we talked to MEPRI and we said, okay, our average salary scale, we need to bring it to a minimum of $40,000 because that's the new required minimum. So that you at least are getting the adequacy that the formula is supposed to be calculating. What we didn't realize until recently when we were doing some more research was that we're still basing, that regional index is still based on average. So some are still going below 1, even though the average was at 1. I mean, the minimum is at 1. But some of you are still being brought below because the regional index is still the same one that was implemented in FY6. And it has never been updated. Now, it's come forward to be updated a few times in front of the Ed Committee and the legislature, but because the cost to update it was pretty high, and it still is, it just didn't happen, unfortunately. And there were too many winners and losers because there was still not stopping at 1, okay? There was still going below. So, fast forward, MEPRI, you want to talk?
Sure, yeah. So the good news is because things were so out of date, the fix has gotten to the point where everybody needs to be brought up. The salary matrix is just too low. And the way that we can fix it is by actually fixing a regional adjustment and solve two problems at once. So again, the proposal is to re-norm everything, recalibrate everything, starting from a minimum teacher salary and adjusting people only upward from 1. So anybody in this room who is getting a regional adjustment below 1 would now go up to 1. The other key thing about this is shifting the metric that we use. So instead of basing this adjustment on salary patterns, it's using national cost of living data. And which is a very similar pattern to salaries in terms of which areas are higher, which areas are lower. But it does allow us to separate this from the individual community areas' ability to raise salaries. So it's by using cost of living, it sort of decouples those two things, and makes it easier to update this over time because you can key it to these national indexes. And again, the fact that everyone's above 1 also makes it a lot easier. It's less of a psychological winners and losers.
And it's more accurate because of the minimum salary. If everybody's having to pay the minimum, and I know you are, nobody's going to be brought below that.
Right. And then the other thing is about this, by shifting to this new metric, the new labor market areas will actually be based on counties because that's how the data is available. So this proposal does seem, we're going to talk about it more in a couple of slides, but this one does seem on track. It's expensive, but the data on this is very clear that what's being provided currently in EPS is too low. And so policymakers heard that and so we've kind of talked through all this. This will be a really quick run through. So there's really 2 reasons why the current regional adjustment is so out of date. One is just we're calling it a deferred maintenance problem. This is saying what Paula said in different words. Some areas are too low. Other areas are not, are being asked to raise more locally than they actually need to cover their salaries. It's like just gotten way out of date over time. And then the second problem is what Paula has talked about this misalignment to the salary matrix and the fact that it was intended to be about averages and averages, and then over time has become salary matrix keyed to minimums. The regional adjustment system needs to reconform to be minimums only going upward. And here's our map. So the current, and I know you're far away, but you might be able to see the colors. Based on 2005 data, anybody who is green is 1.0. So if you are lighter green or yellow, you are in those areas that are currently being adjusted downward from 1. And the areas that are darker green and blue are the ones that are getting the adjustments upward from 1. In the new re-index system based on cost of living, everybody's just moving towards that blue. Everyone's at least a 1.
And the range, by the way, is 0.87 to 1.18.
Right. Where the yellow is, the lowest that people are currently getting right now is a 0.87.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to update based on salaries, that spread has gotten bigger. It would go down to 0.83. By using cost of living and re-indexing with a minimum of 1, the new range is from 1 to 1.18. So as we said, this is expensive. So almost $40 million just in the state share. The impact totally, the total allocation change, total cost of ed is around 70 million, 71 million. In this one, we're really focusing on the state share because as we said before, you locals are already paying your local share. You've been spending that money, but in local optional, right? Because EPS hasn't been giving you what you need to cover your salaries, so especially for those of you who've been going below 1. So we're focusing less on that local share. There is a mill rate impact, but it really just brings in state matching to what you've already been paying.
So to put it better, or different.
Yeah, sure.
Better, sorry. I apologize. To put it in terms that I think of, and maybe, so you're already paying additional local to cover that. How many are paying additional local? Or should I say, how many aren't? Yeah, everybody has to go above an EPS, right? Well, the hope is that by covering more in the formula, by fixing these regional indices, that maybe you won't need as much additional local. And so that will offset that 31.1 million in additional local that this will. You see what I'm saying?
So there are some places that don't see a huge benefit for this because it's not much of a change for you. Your index was already above 1, and you didn't change much with the cost of living. And there's only one labor market area, it's the Skowhegan labor market area, that is actually paying below average salaries. So their index value based on averages would be below 1 if we updated. They've been getting a 1.03 because when things were back in 2005 when this was set up, Skowhegan was at a different economic prosperity, right? It was a mill town, their salaries were high, they were above average. Things have changed since 2005. So that's the one area that actually is helped by only going down to 1.
And who's SAD 54 here? Are they here? Okay. So SAD 54 isn't here. However, I will say that the Skowhegan labor market area includes 11 SAUs. So they would go in this fix, in this correction, would go from 1.03 to 1. They would not go below 1. Nobody ever goes below 1 now. However, the good news is, if we can couple this with the next recommendation, it corrects the loss that Skowhegan sees in this correction and brings them back up to, because of the poverty indicator in the ability to contribute. Just to let you all know that.
In case you were worried about Skowhegan as we were.
Worry about everybody.
Thanks. You ready? Oh, so this is the impact slide. This is your slide.
This is my slide. So, based
The
on
bad formatting is me. That's me.
based on calculations done in the last 2 weeks, I have not slept much. Using FY27 data, so the total EPF, based on just the reindex, just this first one alone, okay, $70 million more is what we need, or 71, excuse me. There's about 11, and that's the 11 SAUs that I just mentioned that are in that Skowhegan labor market area, that would see a decrease. The total decrease amount is 652,000 total. So it's not even really that significant, but, I mean, and this is what they would lose, excuse me, this is the amount of the total allocation. So, you know, on page 5, total allocation, then you've got local share, then you've got state share. That's what we're showing you here. For total allocation, 247 SAUs go up, 11 go down, and that's that labor market area. So see how that corrects everybody who's been going below because of those many reasons Amy just spoke of. Local required share, Mike, I can see.
Sorry.
Thank you. Local required share, 3 go down. Because again, most are going up because it's going to have a cost split 55% approximately between state and locals. So with 245, we're going to see an increase to get to that additional 31. But again, hopefully your additional local can offset most of that, or some of that at least. And then the state share, there are 41 SAUs that go down in their state share and 185 that go up. And that's running through everything in the formula, okay, with this one change. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Moving along.
This one was the big one.
This is huge. This was the biggest cost of any recommendations from the LD 318 report.
Yeah.
But also it's the most important in my opinion. And frankly, Ed Committee loved it. They were all in agreement that this needs to happen. Now the question is, how do we make it happen?
So the second recommendation is this ability to contribute idea around recognizing that even though the current system, which requires the same mill rate expectation for everybody, it's pretty good. It's overall, when you look at the correlations, when you look at the patterns, it does tend to work where more money is being asked of communities that have higher income. We studied this. There's a lot of information in our June 2025 report. This is part 2, ability to pay. It's a big section of the report. However, we do know that there are places where property values have gone up and income has not. It's happened it's pretty much happened to all of us, but in some places it's happened even more extreme. So by this method, which again, the legislature directed us to do this. I'd love to take credit for this, but it was the legislature saying, please find some ways that we could do this, and this is what we came up with. This is about incorporating poverty rates into how EPS allocates subsidy, recognizing that lower income areas don't have as much ability to contribute as higher income areas. So the way that this works is it adjusts the mill rate expectation. So instead of asking every community to raise the same exact mill rate, it will look at the poverty level relative to the rest of the state and say, if you're a high poverty area, we'll base 90% of your mill rate expectation on your property value, same as before, but factor in your poverty just 10%. So, good photo. Normally it's people taking pictures of slides. I had to process that one for a minute. But by adjusting the mill rate expectation, if you're high poverty, your mill rate expectation goes down. That means your local share goes down, and the amount of state share that comes in to fill the gap between that and EPS goes up. And the reverse happens if you're a low poverty area, a high income area. It would ask you to raise more than that statewide mill rate expectation.
So
We studied,
just remember, the mill rate is based on the fact that of the total cost of education, $2 billion, the state is going to cover 55% of that. This local share then is whatever is left, okay? So I believe in FY27 it's 1.1 billion is the state local share, 1.4 billion is the state share, something, maybe 26 numbers, but anyway. So the mill rate then is determined, okay, of the 1.1 billion the locals are going to need to contribute towards the total cost that's been calculated. What is the mill rate that we need to set in order to get to that? And then no SAU, no town was asked in the current model to contribute any more than that mill rate times property value, right? This new possibility includes a poverty factor at 10%. So instead of one set mill rate for everyone, there'll be variable mill rates. Those with higher poverty will have a lower mill rate. Those with lower poverty may have a little higher mill rate. Because we still have to collect that same 1.1 billion. The state isn't going to give any more than 55% at this point. And so we still have to come up with it. So we do need to ask those with lower poverty to contribute a bit more, and so that those with higher poverty can benefit more from the limited state funds. And I realize that can be difficult for those that are in that lower poverty area, because then you've got to figure things out. But that's the distribution model that says, hey, those that can afford more locally, we need you to contribute a little more to your own education locally so that we can help out those that can't afford as much. So every student, remember my slide there that shows all the boxes? Every student has the ability to at least have the opportunity to reach the Maine learning results, no matter where they live.
so we studied a bunch of different poverty measures. I'll get to your question in just 1 second. And believe it or not, the one that works best is the student economic disadvantage rate. And so that measure has become a lot better over time. So we used to worry about that quite a bit. But now the state of Maine has changed the bar for economic disadvantage to equal MaineCare eligibility. So that direct cert data that your school nutrition folks can get from DHHS is now actually very good administrative data. While before it was hard to get information on particularly the reduced lunch eligible, right? Like you would get direct cert information on the folks that were free lunch. You had pretty good data on that, but the reduced lunch was really hard getting all those forms. Now that the bar has gone up a little bit and we're capturing students who are MaineCare eligible, we find that is really good administrative data. And this is a place where while families might forego free lunch or reduced lunch, or they might forego food benefits, families that are eligible for MaineCare tend to take advantage. So there's very good matching on that. It's not perfect. No measure is perfect. But this data was actually, there's someone in the room here who knows a little bit about free and reduced lunch rates. This was the best one of the ones we studied. We did look at household income, we looked at other measures. This one was best. But it is a limited and imperfect measure of poverty. And that is something we have to acknowledge.
However, I will just add about that. So, you know I've been saying for years, we're looking for a better way to determine economic disadvantage. We're trying to get out of you having to do that alternate economic form. Guess what? Apparently this is the best thing we have right now with the data that we have available to us. MEPRI has determined that, they've studied others, this is the best way. So, good news, as Amy said, the direct cert information is already back. Free lunch, still wishy-washy. So guess what? I need you to actually focus more on that alternate economic disadvantage form and collection. And so we're trying to we're working with some, Jen Pooler in 58 had great success in her collections last year, 95%, something. So I'm gonna ask her to write up what she did, and we're gonna share it with everybody. Ta-da, surprise! Because really, right now, that's the best way, and so I want you all to benefit as much as you can, especially now, that economic disadvantage percentage is gonna be even more important in the formula if this gets put through.
And here's a shout out, I'm a Portland person, and Portland, last year I'm now an empty nest, last year my kid was there, I got a text message to do that alternate form. And the superintendent told me now, it's the basic school messaging system. But they had figured out how to use that app that many schools use, and I wish I could remember the name. Took me 30 seconds. I'm one of those families that I know I'm not eligible, haven't filled out that form in 18 years from my kids. Filled it out because it was a thing on my phone and because I knew karma, it helps Portland. So, or at least it helped them feel like it helped Portland, even though I knew
They
I wasn't
collected
eligible.
and know that you're not eligible, but if they can collect.
They at least knew, their rate went up of their collection rate. And again, if your school nutrition folks aren't already taking advantage of the direct cert information, they really need to. Because that's how you're gonna grab the most accurate information to capture kids who you may not know about and may not turn that form in. They'll know if they're
They need to review it and make sure it's accurate, but the direct cert comes directly from DHHS into the calculation. But somebody should be reviewing it, which can only be either the superintendent or your school lunch person, as far as that direct cert stuff goes.
And then the last thing we talked about quite a bit in the June 2025 report is other ways that we should be thinking about property tax relief. And this is something that you probably also want to be talking about in your communities. Maybe not you, maybe superintendents and city councilors, but we do know that there are probably some people out there who are eligible for property tax relief and aren't taking advantage, and that's going to put more pressure on your budgets than it needs to.
And I've said before, because they keep asking, how can we help those that have been in their homes forever and they're on a fixed income, their homes are worth more, but they don't have an income to cover the property taxes? We can't fix that in the funding formula. The education funding formula cannot fix individual tax relief. It never. So the only way to do that. This hopefully will help in the bigger town by adding this, but it's not going to help your grandmother or your mother or whatever. So you need to reach out. You can do this. You can reach out to your legislator and say, hey, how can we help these individuals with individual tax relief? That's the tax committee, not the education committee.
And they are looking at right now raising the amount of the property tax fairness credit for folks under 65. So talk to your legislator about that.
Is that the same thing as the homestead exemption, or is that different?
It's different from the homestead exemption. So it's actually, again, not tax professionals here, but if you are paying, I think the threshold is more than 4% of your income in property taxes, it's in your income taxes, you can get a tax credit up to a certain amount. I think it's $2,000 if you're over 65, and right now it might be $1,000 if you're under 65, but they want to bump that up to $1,500 to make it a little high. And there's also property, again, we talked about some of these property tax relief efforts in our June report. There's also another one where if you are one of those folks that's been in your home for a long time, you can defer your property taxes until after you pass away. And if your town picks it up, there's a state reimbursement. There are programs out there, but not everybody's taking advantage of them. Okay, so this is the proposal is again to adjust the mill rate expectation. 10% of this model would be based on poverty rates. We also looked at other mixes. We looked at 95-5, what if you only incorporate a 5%, 75-25, 50-50, Paula's team modeled all of them. It was a lot of work. And for those of you who've been around a long time, there was a way that income was put into the subsidy formula back before EPS. This is a very different system. So it didn't work back then. We're well aware of those problems. This is not repeating past mistakes. And then the important thing to know about this is it's not raising the costs at all. It's changing how we allocate that fixed pie of state aid. So it's shifting, and it's moving. In the 90-10 model, it moves about $14 million. So it's for those places where the mill rate expectation went up a little bit, they're getting less aid. It's taking that and allocating it to places where the mill rate expectation went down a little bit because they're higher poverty. So it's important that this works super great when we're doing it right alongside the first one. When you're putting an additional $40 million into the formula, this is much less painful because very few districts will see a net loss once you've done both of them together.
In fact, it's about 41 districts, right?
And that's on the next slide. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, next slide, sorry.
You give me that nod.
I'm sorry.
It's about 57 districts, sorry, and it redistributes 14 million. So, yeah, so as you can see, nothing changed in the total, that already happened in one. That's where the extra 70 million came in. You do this, and it redistributes that 14 million with 100, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, that's the redistribution.
Yes,
Mistake here.
this is the redistribution of just the 90-10.
Right, just the 90-10. So if you look at the local share, 118 SAUs actually end up having a reduction in their local share as a result of this. So, and yes, 57 end up going up, with 87 having no change.
And in the lower right corner where it says 41 million, that would be my typo. That should be 1-4, not 4-11.
I didn't even notice that, yeah.
I was like, wow, why doesn't that match? Oh, because I typed it wrong
It's still,
last time.
it's still a redistribution of $14 million. Now, minimum contributors. Guess what this does to you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You know why? Because you're already contributing lower than the mill rate. Because you're only contributing the total cost, which the total cost is less than what your mill rate would be, or your local share would be according to the mill rate times property value and poverty index. And so you're already below the mill rate anyway, and so this does not change anything for you.
Except because this is the A team in the room, we're going to give you I'm going to go in the weeds for a second because someone's going to want to know, why aren't these numbers the same? And it's actually because there's a tiny, tiny impact on minimum contributors, which is those folks that are right on the edge by getting their mill rate going either slightly down or slightly up. They might become a minimum contributor or come off being a minimum contributor. So there's actually a tiny $20,000 impact on those minimum adjustments for minimum contributors.
23,000 if you're gonna go in the weeds.
That's, if anyone's like wondering about the math, that there actually is a little bit of a thing, but it's on the margins, not the headline.
It's really negligible. That's my word of the day.
Just trying to increase the trust factor here for these guys. Okay, so here's walking through, I'm gonna go through this super quickly, but just to sort of see how it would work. So these are pairs of kind of similar districts in terms of their receiver level. So the top two, Portland and Machias, both higher poverty districts. So their mill rate expectation would go down. For Portland, it goes down to 5.97. Machias goes down to 5.84. This was in the year that the statewide mill rate expectation was 6.1. So not huge, right? We're not talking about a dramatic change here. So Portland goes from being 84% local share, Portland's a low receiver, to 82%. So they're getting an extra 2% of their total allocation in state subsidy with this change. Machias, which is a high receiver, goes from getting 70% or paying 30% local share to 29%. So in both cases, they're higher poverty, they're getting more state aid, but it doesn't suddenly change someone from being a low receiver to a high receiver. It's not going to shift that much. The lower poverty example is just another way of saying the same thing for those whose mill rate expectation has gone up. And this also shows on the third pairing how it just doesn't impact those minimum contributors. Any questions on this? Okay, so this is the three models we looked at. And the mill rate expectation is going to change in every one of these because it depends on which fiscal year we were modeling. This one is fiscal year 27 data. So the statewide mill rate expectation in 90-10 is 5.755. The reason it's not 5.76 is that $23,000. So you're saying that the multiplier range is from 0.9 to 1.09. So it's just a little bit, this is actually a very similar range as kind of the regional adjustment, by the way. So just in terms of that tolerance of what people can kind of tolerate and variation from place to place. So the higher districts, the highest poverty districts, the lowest poverty districts would be asked to raise 109% or an extra 9% on their mill rate, and the reverse, 0.9, 90% of the statewide mill rate for those that are the highest poverty. And you can see how in the 50-50 model, the mill rate expectation would vary from 2.9 to 8.43, so quite dramatic in that one. And the one that policymakers have laid down is the 90-10. And again, note that the actual range of mill rate expectations is as low as 0.05, because some of our SAUs have very, very, very low local contributions. This is just, so hold harmless. I added the hold harmless side.
Can you go back, Mike?
I forgot we did this. So LD 2226 is the bill that the legislators put together coming out of all this work. It looks like, based on what we know today, what's going to move forward is the first recommendation, the second recommendation with the 90-10, and a hold harmless. So
That's the recommended amendment, which Laura can correct me if I'm wrong, that hasn't been officially vetted yet. Correct. So what we're telling you is what we understand is the intention, but it is not officially vetted. So please understand that if it doesn't happen, it's not our fault. Just kidding.
Well, in terms of process, and Laura can say more if we need to. So the bill gets reported out. There was a public hearing on LD 2226. Then they had a work session, and they said they made an amendment in that work session to pull out some of the recommendations. We're going to talk about some more. But this is the stop point where we say, here's the headline. Then we're going to give you the too long, didn't read, extra stuff that's relevant, but maybe not happening. So 1 and 2, then the last thing that happens is they have to review that amendment to make sure it captures everything before even the language gets published online. So you can't see any of this on the legislature website right now because they're still in the process of figuring out what the language is of the amendment. It looks like they're going to amend their amendment from what we're hearing.
Correct. But again, it's not
So,
official.
Yeah.
But it is going to, the intention is to include what's called a hold harmless for those SAUs, the 57 that we saw, although, 57. Wait, no, 57, let's go with that, that we saw.
I'm going to interrupt, sorry.
Good.
So this 90-10 slide we showed with that $14 million was just the 90-10. There's another slide that isn't actually in here,
Okay.
but it's what happens when you stack these two together. And so when the first one happens and you put the $38 million in, it actually goes down to only about a total of $5 million that is totally lost for those districts and it's a different number, and you have that number before.
Let me explain what the hold harmless is. For anyone after that second one, after the $14 million redistribution, if their state share portion, we're going to compare the new state share to what was last year's state portion. So for last year, in this case, it's FY27. Okay. Assuming we do this in FY28, it's a state share, comparing the new state share for every SAU to last year's state share, FY27. What is the difference? Anybody who goes less than last year's state share would get a hold harmless amount to keep them at least even with last year's state share. That came to about $5 million. So in the redistribution of $14 million after the first calculations in the new funding calculation, when we got to the end and had the state share and compared it to last year's state share, FY27, upcoming year, you can keep up 3 years all at the same time. anyone who had a decrease in state share would get an allocation of funding to keep them even with last year. And that came to about 5 million, and I believe the number of SMUs that would get that was 41.
Right, so this was the slide about just the 90-10 impact. The
Well,
57 who would, lose that
Yeah,
$14 million total, most of those folks gained so much on the first one with the re-indexing that net, once you combine them together, they're not losing.
So it's 41 SAUs that would get a portion of 5 million. The hold harmless language that may be put into the amended version has it go at 100% of the difference for 3 years. And then in the 4th year, it does 75% of the difference. And in the 5th year, it's 25% of the difference. Keeping in mind, that difference will change every year because it's always going to be the new state share compared to the prior year state share. So that's the plan. It's going to be 5 years of a hold harmless. With after 3 years, it will start to go down, and then eventually it will go away after 5 years.
And what's key about this, and again, this language needs to get out there so we can look at it and make sure we all are on the same page. But the intent that they talked about in the committee conversation was that they wanted to hold folks harmless just for these 2 changes. So that if you lose students or your valuation goes up and you have those changes in subsidy, it's not going to hold you harmless against those kind of changes, only for these changes in the model. And then there also are some statute changes that are required because in order to move to cost of living, in order to do 90-10, we have to change state law. So LD 2226 does all those things, and hopefully soon we'll be able to look at the language.
And if any of you understand exactly what I just said, please come work for me because I'm not sure I understand. Just kidding, I know exactly what it's.
So this is the number. We do have a slide on it.
We do.
Yesterday was a really long day. I was finishing these slides rather late last week. So there you go.
Okay, moving on. Anybody, seriously, anybody questions about that? Good. Because we can't answer.
Okay, so then here were the other elements that were in LD 2226. And it comes down to further study. So they've asked MEPRI, and they're asking MEPRI, but it's gonna need the department. We haven't talked about this
Yeah,
yet.
but we're not named. Sorry.
I know, so this is all, again, once the language is there, we could look at it and make for sure. But anyway, so they talked about having us study what it might look like to use 5-year averages for enrollment and valuation instead of 3-year averages, just to smooth out some of those changes from year to year. Looking at some of those other ways that we might measure poverty. Again, we've already done some analysis. We didn't pull economic disadvantage out of the air, but some of the folks, particularly those who are in that $5 million hold harmless, are concerned that student poverty rates aren't really adequate to represent the whole community. So we're going to try, again, to look at some additional measures. So far, what we've looked at, it still kind of tracks, but we'll see. We've also been asked to look at the impact of inflation since 2020. And looking at, there's another thing in there that I'm still not exactly sure what it means. They want to do further study. I think I cut this directly. Further study of which components are considered essential.
Yeah.
And whether the funding formula accounts for the true cost.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we just did in June 2025. So I'm not 100% sure what this is going to be, but in the fullness of time, we'll figure that out. And special education, we're studying not for the legislature, but in our current EPS contract. So now we're going to go through pretty quickly some other recommendations that we made as part of LD 318, but that, if we're reading the tea leaves correctly, are not going to make it over the finish line. So the first was this recommendation 3 is areas of EPS that MEPRI and or the department or in conjunction we found out were inadequate, that needed to be updated. The big one is transportation. Transportation is too low. And so we're recommending bringing that up to where it should be. There were some impacts during COVID. And so this is an area that will come back around again. Because it did get pulled out because they're worried about the total cost of this package.
The total cost of the whole package, originally in the first amended language, was about 114 million total, with 57, I think, being state share. So there's no way any of it would get through right now. It's impossible when you realize where would that money come from. And so hopefully some of these further recommendations can come up in later years. But just to get those first couple things in, I think would be an amazing win. I hope you all agree with that, because that would be really helpful.
So you will be, that may be another option for advocacy at that point in time. And this is also, I'm going to take a minute to say, it's been an interesting thing to figure out for MEPRI particularly, what we mean when we use the word recommendation, because it's not MEPRI's job to make policy recommendations. That's legislators' jobs, it's superintendents' jobs. When it comes to the EPS cost model, we can recommend when we do the analysis and say, this isn't adequate. This is no longer tracking with what school districts need for resources. So there are cases where I will use the word recommend, but in most cases, if I use it, it's an accident, because it's really about saying, this is what we think will achieve your intent. And that's what we mean by recommend when it comes to the other ones. When it comes to these areas, this is a recommendation. Transportation is too low, it should be raised. The cost is about 6.9 million in state share. In the local share, just like with the salaries, there is a local share to this, but you're already paying it. The model's not accounting for all of your costs. The second recommendation in this bucket was some changes that MEPRI wanted to make just to tweak and update parts of the model that just have changed over time. They all counteract each other, so there was no net cost to this whole thing. And I wanted to do it anyway, but I think it was just too much too soon, so that got stripped out. And then there's one more on the next slide. This is the big one. There was a proposal to do variable economic disadvantage weights so that those districts with higher poverty rates would receive a higher weight per economically disadvantaged student. So this was a big change. And it had a lot of support in committee, but it was expensive. And so the total cost of this, it would have had variable weights where at the lower poverty, wealthier district end, you would just get that 0.15 that you currently get on the base funding, and you could no longer get that targeted extra 0.05. At the higher end, you would get a total of a 0.35 in those places that have super high student economic disadvantage. The state share cost of this was going to be about $11 million, local share $9 million.
Together it came to about 21 million. And so it was just too much to add on to the 70 million that we already have.
And I think this topic will also come around again in some way, shape, or form, because there was a lot of support for this at the Education Committee. I think the cost just was too much all at once. Okay, and then the last category is around special education. We have talked a lot, and I've actually been in front of you guys, at least twice that I can remember, talking, and once in Lewiston, talking about special education, and in particular how the fact that the special education part of the EPS funding model is really expenditure-based is a problem for equity. Because we know that some districts are spending a lot more per pupil than other districts, and when they do, those tend to be lower poverty, wealthier districts. Not always, but they tend to be. And when they do, the model says, okay, and then adds that to their allocation, which really translates down the line to getting more stable for those places that overall are lower poverty. So it's a concern. We can't say for sure if it's which level of spending is adequate. There's so much that you don't know from looking at the financial data alone. And so that's why we're also doing some more qualitative research this year under our contract with the department to also look at some of those challenges that are happening in districts around the cost of students with more intense needs. So one of the things we recommended and did a study on, which we gave a briefing, but the report isn't finalized yet, is around what it might look like to add more regional infrastructure just to help coordinate some of those services, with the idea that that might even out some of this, some of the really drastic differences you can see from district to district in the availability of services. I spent last fall going around the state talking to MADSEC directors in their regional meetings, and it's pretty stark. Some of the challenges that even within one region can happen from district to district, with challenges with staffing shortages, challenges with service providers, challenges with access to special purpose private schools. And there are deserts in parts of the state where those services are not there. So the spending is a challenge, but also it's because the services are a challenge right now in the state. So this slide is talking more about thinking about that next step of if we were to do some of these regional centers, the regional infrastructure, then that would change how some of the funding might flow, but all that is really TBD. And so this is, we've gone back and forth, and this has been the area where working back and forth with the department on what happens when we try to change the special ed model. It's fraught because of that question of, I can look and tell you who's spending more per pupil. I can't tell you if they're spending too much per pupil. I don't know that. Anecdotally, we did a thing a couple of weeks ago with superintendents, and I asked them to stand up if they had 20 or more students. Where's Colin? Colin was there. 20, if you have 20 more students with kind of intense special education needs, stand up. And then I said, raise your hand if you have kids who with those more intense needs who are not getting all the services that you want them to get. Pretty much everybody raised their hand. This is happening where kids might be getting some services, but not what they would hope to, what the providers would hope that they were getting. And then I said, raise your hand if you have kids in your district who are getting services in their IEP that you wouldn't necessarily recommend. That either there's been a due process consideration or they moved to the district with something that maybe in your district might not be necessary, but it's still there, you're working on a transition. And once again, almost everybody raised their hand. And then I said, raise your hand if you raised your hand both times, and everybody raised them. So this is a situation where we know what's happening out there is a problem. Special education spending is all at once too much and not enough. And so what it really comes down to is we need to be doing more to promote early intervention. The CDS, early childhood stuff, has to get figured out. It seems to be working in those earlier cohorts. Early intervention and early intervention when kids are identified as getting off track. That's the way that we can be long-term growing ourselves out of some of these challenges in special education. But right now, we messing with the funding formula is fraught.
It needs further study.
That's the short version, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it, we did it.
Email us if you have questions. Bye. Just kidding, seriously. Any questions? A lot to take in, I know. So, I'll do a quick survey. Amy likes the hand raising surveys. I'll pretend I used to work at Nepri. Oh wait, I did. If we go under the assumption that the regional index and the ability to contribute poverty measure and the hold harmless are put into a bill this year to be effective for FY28 calculations, how many of you would be in favor of that as an adjustment to how we're calculating EPS, just based on what you've heard today?
Personally, or as a representative of my district? Because
You're going to represent. So, again, we're all taxpayers. I hadn't looked, but I finally did because apparently my, where I live would actually be on the hold harmless list for a very pittance of money. But apparently in the new model, we would pay a little more. And you know what, frankly, if that's what it takes to help those that have less funding, that's the whole point of the distribution of EPS. And I preach it, so I've got to accept it because I believe it. I really do. And so I really believe this could be a hard pill to swallow, but it's the intent of the formula right from the start that makes it unique and makes it hopefully better for Maine. It's been off for too many years. This regional index thing is huge. If you can get that fixed, I promise you, I will stand on a table somewhere as long as it's solid, and I will do a happy dance. Because that's best for everybody. And then this poverty measure inclusion, I never considered in my life variable mill rates. Love it. I've told Amy.
Jim Sloan gets the problem.
Jim Sloan, he gets kudos for thinking of that and figuring out how to make it work. Is it going to be more work for me and our team? Absolutely. But it's going to be better because it adds that little bit of poverty measure. So honestly, if you think about it for the whole state, not even just for the SAU you represent, we're all taxpayers. We all want the best kids, the kids to get the best education possible, right? Because eventually they're gonna decide what nursing home we're in and how that gets funded, for one thing. But then also as a representative of your district, but of course we're all taxpayers. So yeah, honestly, anybody think it's a terrible idea? Oh, and one of the vendors started to raise his hand and yawn. And I thought somebody was raising their hand and I was gonna have to go in the back and take them in the back room. I know, and some of you that didn't raise your hand, you probably just need more time to think about it and understand it better, and I get that. Does anybody want to, even if you don't have questions, do you have an opinion or anything you want to add?
One thing I would add is I think everyone can hear me, right?
Can y'all hear him?
If you really want to address the impact on lower income folks, the state needs to look at things like the homestead exemption.
Absolutely.
Because that moves money directly from the pockets of the lower income people into those folks with the higher value homes. And also, half of those higher value homes in the state are owned out of state,
Exactly.
so they don't get the exemption. So,
And that's exactly why taking property valuation out of the formula completely wouldn't help us, because then we wouldn't be getting the extra funding from those out-of-staters. But I agree with you 100%. But again, we can't do that in the education formula. That has to be the tax committee and taxation area. So I agree 100%, and I think all of you as personal taxpayers in Maine should reach out to your representative and talk to them about that.
And there is right now a real estate property tax task force that is halfway through. They have an interim report out, and this is one of the things they really want to look at. And so Mepri's watching it closely. We've been talking with the analysts that are supporting them. It's these two things we're hoping are synergistic. But yeah, the 90-10 is making a little dent in some of the property tax thing, but it's never, as Paula said earlier, it's never going to solve the problem of the low-income folks who happen to live in a high-income community and vice versa. So time check. We have a few more minutes to talk about special ed.
Funny. Got one more, sir.
I do have a question, Billy. I have a question for the audience. Is how many of us had budgets that failed last year? How many had budgets that failed more than once?
Almost.
So if this is gonna help that, I'm in favor.
Yeah.
Because the last few years have been
Difficult,
have
exactly.
been
That I will add one more thing on that, because what that 90-10 thing is going to do is provide more state aid. What your communities do with that additional state aid is the next question. Are you going to use it to provide tax relief, or are you going to use it to try to catch up on some of those services that you might want to add in your community because you're just squeaking by at the early EPS and you really would like to do more for kids? That's going to be the interesting thing. The last time we studied this, it wound up being about half and half. But we're hoping we'll see what happens this time. But that's going to be the key challenge for your communities is that about tax relief, or is it about being able to better afford public schools? So I want to take just a minute for this group to talk about special education and what's ahead with some of the funding challenges. So, and high cost, the services for students with more intense needs. And if it slips out of my mouth that I say high cost kids, it is not what's in my heart. I want to say that again and again. We're talking about kids who have intense needs. And when you're talking money, we start to talk about that. But it's not what's in my heart. Forgive me if it comes out. It usually does, at least at one point. But when we're talking about those more intense programs and services that kids need, what we want to move to, and this is what we talked about a couple of times in other meetings, including at least one with you guys, is moving to a multiple weights model, where based on the intensity of services that a student requires, they would get a different weight in the model. But in order to do that, we have to be able to collect those costs, study them, and allocate them, and figure out a way of identifying when a kid would be in tier 1 versus tier 2 versus tier 3. And so the two big factors that we need to know that are going to come back down to a combination of you guys and HR is knowing the difference between a one-to-one ed tech and a not one-to-one ed tech in special education. I know how many dollars you're spending. I can look at staff data and see how many people there are. I can kind of connect the two to get a sense of salaries, things like that. But unless I know who are the one-to-ones, that's a cost that belongs with the tier 2 kids, the kids with more intense needs. The other ed techs are a more general, I don't want to use it, more foundational part of the special education model, right? And then the second cost is similarly the teachers who are in self-contained classrooms, working in very small ratios, versus the special education teachers that are working in resource rooms, pushing into classrooms. So this is part of the puzzle. The last thing is going to be related services. So my question to you guys, for just those things, you know that there is, oh no, I'm going to forget, it's a function code, right? There's a function code where you have to report by self-contained, and the data is garbage. And as you know, and when you look at the state totals, you can see
Not your fault.
not your fault. Reasonable decisions you all are making. When you look at the state totals, you can see there's money in all those categories. Like, oh, awesome, you can just use this data. But then you look at the SAU level, and most of you are pretty much taking all your spending and putting it in one bucket, maybe two. Some of the bigger districts are clearly doing their best to try to attempt to parse their costs out into these categories, but for the most part, that's pretty hard to do. So, my question to this group is, what I've heard in the past from you guys and from special ed directors is, for some costs, that's actually a feasible thing to do. It's when you get to all the costs that you're like, okay, so how do I figure out the pencils that I just bought and how I'm going to parse that cost out, right? Like some of the things are just not feasible. If we were to come back and try to adjust in some way, shape, or form how we're asking to report that data, can you give me a thumbs up? Yeah, we can do that if it helps make special ed funding better. I'm not sure. It sounds like it would be really hard, or that would be impossible. Could you guys give me, like, yeah, give us enough time, and we can parse out.
Not necessarily supplies, but the three.
Exactly. So I'm not asking for supplies. What I'm asking for is if we pared it down so that we're saying we just really need to know about those two staff categories and something about related services. And that's the part that was messier. Do you think that you'd be able to use those function codes a little more?
That would be really helpful, because that's part of the problem and the reason that we keep saying further study, further study, further study. We can't get the data we need to really look at what's happening in Maine. And that's where we really need your help.
So this is not something, we can give you advance notice, but this is something that we've been trying to figure out. Where's the cart and where's the horse and how do you get this thing started? But there's something around that if we can just improve a little bit of the data collection, it can go a long way towards figuring out this cost model. So that was really helpful. Thank you.
Are you asking us if we could provide information on costs that have already happened and that are not necessarily coded that way in our district? So we'd have to dig deep and look at, or are you asking in the future, could we code it a little more precisely so that you would get a sense of this ed tech is an ed tech one-on-one?
It's about if the department gave you guidance on how to change your reporting in the future, how hard do you think that would be? And I'm getting a thumbs up. But I'm also going to need a couple of volunteers to help us look at past data, because in order to figure that out, we're going to have to start somewhere. So that would be something that we would probably ask for some volunteers and pay you some summer stipends if you could help go through some of your data.
Volunteer.
Thank you. But it would be, we recognize that it's not really reasonable to ask you to go back. That's hard. So we would try to do it going forward.
So I'm thinking that it could possibly be very, and so I have probably nothing to share with Portland, but 4 towns and 2,000 students, and very high functioning finance team that I joined a year ago. So, but we're already routinely breaking out self-contained versus resource room, and right down to the supplies. And so I'm thinking in terms of the related services, right now everybody receives speech therapy goes to one code, but I could just change the last digit in the function code to differentiate between the heightened kids and the low kids. Am I missing something that's it?
I don't want to underestimate what I've heard from other folks where it's not that easy everywhere. And I think it comes down to the information systems that exist. And especially when you're talking about those related services, because you have to know this service was provided to child X, not child Y. Child X is tier 1, child Y is tier 2. And there's additional communication that has to go back and forth between you and your special ed directors. I am thrilled for you that you have a high functioning team. But not every district has all those components in place for it to be an easy lift.
I also have a high functioning special ed director who bends over backwards to help me out, coding.
That's excellent,
And
yeah.
it works both ways,
Yeah.
so yeah, we didn't address.
Well, the last time I was here, I was saying, hey, y'all can just do this better, right? And then I heard, it's actually harder than you think, Amy, and so I've learned some empathy along the way. Did you have a question?
Oh, I have a kind of common
Yeah.
question. So one is that in the budget bill is that once a year, when we kind of reassign all the ed techs, which there's always a shuffling of the deck every year. And the one-on-one ed techs in this formula is a double-edged sword, because that is the first thing a special ed, like, lead teacher is gonna lead towards, is, oh, I need a one-on-one. And if you don't have that under control, you'll be flooded with ed techs. So I'd watch out if you're paying for them 100%, because then they'll really want it.
You just nailed what a big part of this conversation is that, okay, so we can figure out the cost model, then how do you structure it in such a way that you are not incentivizing placements in self-contained classrooms so that you can get more funding, placements in out-of-district, hiring one-to-one ed techs, like that is,
I think it has to
Also
do with
very
IEP
important.
requirements.
and I think also a little bit more, what I heard from special ed directors was heartbreaking around some of the challenges in some parts of the state where they're saying, and literally, I have one tool in my toolkit and it's a one-to-one aid. I don't have early intervention. I have a district of, 400 kids, like small enough that you don't have that economy of scale, but big enough that it's not just one kid and you can try to figure it out. So it's messy. Yeah.
One of my concerns would be that, I don't know about anybody else's, but Northern team, it seemed like people are jumping between positions all the time. And so one person's our resource room one day, but tomorrow they could be filling in for a self-contained. So that would be not easy to really get down to the actual cost because of that. And I could see what he was just kind of saying is that I could see them putting an IEP in to bring them up to try to get more money, and it really isn't what is beneficial.
That's right. And again, this is where we've been chasing our tail, frankly, a little bit. But how do you fix this better without doing harm? Fix it better, like I said.
Absolutely.
Sure did. So that's it. It's messy. I mean, I'm not trying to say that I know all the answers here. It is really, really important. We're spending $600 million on special ed. We have one of the highest identification rates in the country, and Maine needs to figure this out because our kids are struggling, right? And that's the end of the game for us. How we make sure that we're providing adequate resources to help our kids be successful.
One more.
When you talk about the 600 million, does that include our tuitions going to special purpose private school and the Maine Care C?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I just think that we can generate costs for us, but we send millions of dollars of tuition money to special purpose private schools, and then we get billed for the 30% of the C. But are they following the same model? Because maybe they have our higher needs students, but they have to put IEPs together as well. And is that going to be the same as the methods that we should be considering with our IEPs as we look at the whole funding picture?
It should be the same IEP. So that's the thing. It gets messier, and this is one of the things that, back to this other study on regional special education, the one thing that MEPRI would love to see is a little bit more unpacking of what is happening with out-of-district tuition, and it's actually not just tuition to special purpose private schools, it's also the many districts who are tuitioning all your kids to some other district because you don't operate schools. Or you don't operate the schools for all the grades, right? So all of that, so the home district has to have a special ed director. That's hard, right? Like to have that IEP that someone else is administrating, but you're responsible for it. I'd love to see if there were some regional service centers, a different way of thinking about kids in out-of-district placements with a little more oversight to help make sure that everybody has the information they need to know the kids getting. And that also is a really sticky wicket then in terms of like who's in charge of IEP and how do you share those costs without incentivizing out-of-district placements. I think we did it.
Anything else? Apparently we still have time. Chris has another question.
so I'm sure that you've thought of this, but if we're paying tuition for out of district placement, and then is that receiving, school also reporting, and if so, isn't that part of the special ed cost being doubled up because it's showing up as special ed tuition on our side?
Yeah,
And then you
we have to back all that out.
expenses that-
When it's from one district to the other, it's not, but it is also interesting, and so in this report, that's actually not on our website yet, but it will be soon. It's interesting that when you look at that situation, so the tuition dollars, we can look at them because you guys report them this way, and whether those tuition dollars are going to a private school or another district. And when you look at the tuition for other districts and the total spending in those districts that do not operate schools, their special ed costs are really low. And so we know, unless there's some coding thing going on that I'm not picking up on, that it's probably happening that the receiving district is not really capturing all the costs of those students. Because the sending district has low spending across the board. Like not 100% of the time, but like when you look at them as a group, their spending on special education per special education pupil is a lot lower. So there's some stuff going on here with fairness and equity around being the receiving district and maybe having a hard time capturing, especially when you start getting down to the dollars and pennies, right? Like, how are you recognizing all the services you're providing that, in theory, someone else should be responsible for, but. Well, thank you so much.
Let's not belabor it, but
Thank you very much, and you know how to reach us.
At this time, I'd like to invite, we're fortunate to have the chair of the Governor's Commission on School Construction. Valerie, you want to step forward? It's a great pleasure for us to have such a distinguished speaker on such an important topic. So, Valerie, I'll set up my camp and
Good. Okay, we're gonna use this podium.
please do. Please do.
Is this mic working?
It's working, yes.
Well, it's always nice to start the day being all distinguished. So, that's,
Think of the comparison.
yes. So I am Valerie Landry, and my background is a little bit more than the chair of the Governor's Commission on School Construction, which just concluded, and that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Prior to that, I served as an executive director in a nonprofit organization for many years. I also served in state government, leadership position in the King administration. I was Commissioner of Labor for 8 years. I stayed on a little bit longer with Governor Baldacci, who had already decided to merge the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Behavioral and Developmental Services, and asked me to chair a group to figure out how that might work. And beyond that, then I've been doing management and organizational consulting for quite a few years. And that's with state government, county government, municipal government, nonprofits, and the private sector. So it has enabled me to really have a nice view of what's happening out there in the world, and it's been a real privilege to be in all of those organizations. So I want to thank you first for inviting me, Mike, and I don't know many of you. Is Colin Walls? Is Colin?
He could not be here today.
He could not be here, so leadership, and Sherry Rudy, there you go, you're Sherry, and Sherry Proctor. Oh, all right, okay. And Don Pooler. There, I'm gonna grab my glasses too, so I can see everybody a little bit more easily. Which might be a good thing. And thank you, Mike, for the invitation. So I'm pleased to talk with you today about the Governor's Commission on School Construction final report. Members of the commission include a member from your body, Hollis Cobb. I don't think Hollis is here, but Hollis played a hugely important role in this endeavor, and I'll talk a little bit about Hollis in a bit. I understand you've all received copies of the report, at least online. Is that true? Studied it.
There will be a quiz.
There's no quiz, but of course it's very interesting reading. I'm not going to go through it. I'm sure it's very sad for you to know section by section. I'm not going to do that, but I urge you to read all the sections. I do want to highlight the main points, and then I'd like to open it up for discussion. So I'm just going to talk for a very short period of time, and then I'd like to hear from you about your perspectives on this issue, any comments you have on the report, etc. The topics I'm going to hit this morning have to do with Governor's executive order, what we were charged to do, the composition of the commission, the process that we used, and the key findings, and then where do we go from here? So that's only going to take me about 10 minutes or so to run through, and then we'll open it up. So the governor's executive order set the stage for the commission's work. The first line of that order stated, every child in Maine should be able to attend a safe, modern, efficient, and accessible public school, regardless of where they live. That statement became the commission's overarching goal. The executive order also stated, this issue requires a well-informed, feasible plan for addressing the current and future needs of public school facilities. The commission worked for the past year to develop such a plan. Our job wasn't just to report out problems. Our job was to try to figure out what the path forward might be. And that is what is contained in the report. Other requirements in the executive order included review how other states fund school facilities, outline changes in relevant state law, rules, and policies, and examine whether to establish a school building finance authority. That was our charge. Those were our marching orders. So, first, the composition of the commission. And I want to highlight this because it really had a profound effect on the outcome and the report. We had 3 state agency leaders, Maine Department of Education Commissioner Pender Macon, the Department of Administrative and Financial Services Commissioner Elaine Clark, and former Department of Admin and Financial Services Associate Commissioner Jenny Boyden. We had 3 superintendents representing the southern, central, and northern regions of the state. They are Chris Howell from RSU 14. Is there RSU 14 here today? Jay McCall from RSU 39. I don't think RSU 39 is here, right? Not today. And Rhonda Sperry from RSU 64. So there are 3 superintendents. Also representatives from the following groups. Hollis Cobb represented all of you. Hollis, as you know, is the manager of the Gorham School Department. Vern Desjardins is member of the Maine State Board of Education. Arthur Dudley from Arthur Dudley Contractor Builder Company. Roy Gott, he was in RSU 24. He's a school board member who represented on the commission the Maine School Boards Association. Anthony Giacarino, who's a senior program officer for the Maine Health and Higher Educational Facilities Authority. And Justin Poirier, town manager of Monmouth and president of the Maine Municipal Association. That's a really good group. That's a really diverse group, a lot of experience, a lot of expertise. They really drove the nature of this report. And I believe their expertise and experience is the reason why the recommendations in this report are strategic, practical, achievable, and results-oriented. So what was the process? Well, we held at least 50 meetings. Collectively, in addition to those meetings, this involved thousands of hours, literally, thousands of hours over the course of a little more than a year. We spent all that time examining the issue and potential solutions. We sought information from people and reports in Maine, nationally, and other states. This was a really transparent process. Commission meetings were open to anyone who wanted to join, and people did. Everyone was offered, anyone who joined was offered the opportunity to comment, or anyone who attended, either at meetings or in subsequent communications, and they did. Meeting agendas and summaries were posted online. We published an interim report in April 2025 of all that we had learned and all that we were considering. And throughout the year, we assessed the level of agreement in each concept area, major concept area, with the entire commission, to know where everybody was all the way along. Importantly, we did not start this process with any solution in mind. Nobody walked into that first meeting thinking, I know what the solution is. I mean, some people just said, it's more money, it's just more money, that's the only solution. But, most of us did not walk in with any particular solution in mind. We sought first to understand the problems, of which there are many, and all the variables, of which there are many, and only then did we start to consider how they could best be addressed. I want to acknowledge one group in particular. I think you're quite familiar with the Maine Education Policy Research Institute, MEPRI. They published 2 reports in January 2025 that were invaluable to us. One of them is on your website, I saw that. Policies and Practices report. And the other is a summary of an in-person inventory conducted by the Maine Department of Education on the condition of public schools in Maine. And as I mentioned MDOE, we got 2 people who sat through most of those commission meetings right here with us today, Paula Gravel and Laura Sear, and I just want to thank them publicly and acknowledge they sat through a lot of meetings. And Paula sent us a ton of information. Every time we had a question about how much does this cost, what does this happen, Paula said, I'll get it to you, and she did it over and over again, and made suggestions and proposals about how things could be different. So Paula, thank you for all of that. You're still standing, even with the school funding formula stuff.
We're tired.
Going on. So that was our process. Early in the process, so that was the process of the commission's work. But early in the process, we learned from the Maine Department of Education that the price tag to replace or renovate the existing school buildings in Maine hovers around $11 billion. Now, that's, as some have pointed out, if that was all done today, but remember, the cost of construction continues to escalate, right? So that's if it was done today. In 1990, the cost of a new school, per square foot cost of a new school building was $100 per square foot. Today it's $600. 10 years from now it'll be something else, and 20 years from now it'll be something else. And for those of you who want to look at where that $11 billion came from, you probably already know, because you've reviewed this report so carefully. It's on page 51 in the report. It was produced by Scott Brown, and it's basic math. How much square footage? What's the age of the building? Now, we've had people say, I don't think that's a real number. That's stuff. Let's drop it by $2 billion. The reality is, when we looked at other states, Vermont is not too different from this. It's lower, but they have fewer schools. And nationally, we understand that this number is consistent with national figures. So Scott came up with a number that's pretty squarely somewhere in that ballpark. And it's a big number. We also learned early on, because of these MEPRI reports that were published in January of 2025, but it was so helpful to us, we were just getting started. We learned that of the approximately 250 schools surveyed in 2024, both mold and air quality concerns were identified in nearly half. According to MEPRI, that suggests there are likely schools with hidden issues among the schools that were not surveyed. So right off the bat, as a commission, we knew we had some really big problems. It's an $11 billion financial problem, right? And we have a health and safety problem. The first 2 big learnings that we got. We also learned that we have a system of have and have-nots. The haves are the districts with the capacity, human and financial, to apply for state funds. Not an easy process, doable, it's well explained, well managed by the department, but it's not easy. The have-nots are those districts or those schools whose situation might be just as dire. They don't have the capacity to even apply for funds. It's a problem. Big problem. As the report stated, additional funding is crucial. Also, the Commission concluded the funding needs to be diversified, and in the report, there's a fair amount of detail on ways to diversify that revenue stream. It's not only the two primary sources that you have now, or maybe you have federal. But the commission, although obviously additional funding is crucial, everybody here in this room knows that, the commission concluded that money alone will not solve the problem. There just isn't enough of it. It's not enough, right? If we're talking about $11 billion, not enough. Don't have enough money. It's sort of, those of you who've done any kind of, you have all this experience in your school districts, but if you've done any, building work at your house or remodeling, and you speak to your builder or your architect and you say, can I do, this or this? And they say, lady, you can do whatever you want if you get the money. Yeah, do whatever you want if you got the money. You could have 600 schools, we could have 1,200 schools. We got the money. We don't have that kind of money. That's an issue, another issue. So the commission concluded that money alone can't solve this problem. So we focused on other things as well. To reduce cost and the time burden on districts. When you read the report, those include things like reducing soft costs, such as architectural and engineering services via pre-qualification, prototype designs being used in other states, in fact other countries, that can be customized at the local level. So you start with the design, if you want. Again, everything that I'm saying is not any kind of mandate, right? This is for districts that might benefit or might choose this path. Resources targeted specifically to deferred maintenance, reducing the cost of equipment via central purchasing. The state already has a central purchasing arm. Some districts take advantage of it. We've learned that others might not. It could. The state could do the enrollment studies, relieving the burden on districts, right? So reduce cost and reduce the burden of time on superintendents and all of you in the districts who spend a huge amount of time on these sorts of issues. We also focused on maximizing existing resources. Those are issues like consolidation, sliding scale for state funds so it's not 100% or zero, spread the money out. Repurposing building and grounds. There's no real central place right now where anyone, whether it's the university or a private company or a federal or a state entity, says, we're thinking in 5 years of unloading this building or these grounds. No place where anyone can go and find out. Where is that? How could it affect a local community? Are there some repurposing opportunities? And using data to much better advantage. Collecting and synthesizing critical information for planning and investment purposes. I'll just give you one example on that. Early on in this process, probably the first day, we saw the consolidation flags waving. Here's the answer. Consolidation. I heard that over and over and over again. Here's the answer. It's consolidation. Okay, right, that would be, let's dig into that. How many schools could be consolidated? How many are within 10 miles of each other? Well, we don't have that easily. We can get it. Not easy, but we'd have to sort of map it, get it. How much would it save financially? Well, we can't really tell that, but we think it will because it's intuitive, right? One roof instead of 5, one HVAC instead of 5. That makes sense. That data is not available. That's the kind of data that can be available. In 1997, when the last Governor's Commission delivered its report, we didn't have the tools we have now. The data analytic tools today are really sophisticated, and they're getting better and better and better. You all, your boards, anyone who's interested in a community should be able to look at a dashboard and play around with some variables. What if we were to do this? Or what if we were to do that? In regard to consolidation, I just want to come back, and we can do, when we do Q&A on that, I just want you to recognize, I don't want you to think that it's just Maine that doesn't have the answers to those questions. Some other states don't either. Consolidation nationwide, it's been hard to capture the financial savings, although there is some research on that. In our commission, we had a lot of conversation about the qualitative benefits, and we can talk more about that, the benefits for students. So, reduce cost and time burden, maximize existing resources, use data to much better advantage. The data right now is siloed in different places. You can go on the MDOE website, Department of Labor has other stuff over here. It's not, migration patterns, workforce issues, all of those things, you have to go to different places to find them. Because people don't have the time or the wherewithal to do that. There are ways to bring that data together. And we talked during the commission's process, we met with the state economists, we met with folks at Department of Labor about, would you be interested and willing to work more closely with members involved in this going forward on what data would really be useful to districts and boards and superintendents and the general public on making decisions? And they said, yes, of course. I said, have you ever been asked to do it? No, we haven't. These are siloed operations, but interesting. The strategies that I just mentioned to you are strategies in plain sight. We did not invent them. This wasn't a good ideas club at the commission saying, don't. We just did something. These examples, every strategy that's in that report either is happening somewhere else or it's best industry practice. These are tried and true. Now, will all of them make a huge difference in Maine? Probably not. Will some of them? Yeah. They will. Each of the strategies, as I said, is based on something happening somewhere else or proven industry practice. I want to give you a couple examples. Let's take centralized procurement. Speaking of the earlier speaker. Some national estimates, not necessarily related only to schools, estimate that centralized purchasing can save up to 14%. But let's say it's smaller. Let's say it's 10%. That's a big number when 11 billion is your price tag. Or let's say it's even 5%. That matters as districts are struggling to balance infrastructure needs with teachers and staff and other demands that they have. Similarly, investment in deferred maintenance can result in big savings over time. It's estimated, and I know I'm speaking to experts here, so I defer to you. I understand that the cost of deferred maintenance compounds at 7% a year. Every dollar invested in deferred maintenance, the estimate is saves 4. So we get at that in a more direct, strategic, and intentional way with state funds, however we do it, to drive down the cost, right? That's what we're talking about when we say reduce cost, right? Driving down deferred maintenance. Will that happen in 1 year or 2 year or 3? No. 20 years goes by a heartbeat when it comes to infrastructure. Will it drive down costs over time? You bet. You bet it will. Now, some are quick to point out, nah, gonna save that much. Centralized procurement, come on. What's it gonna save, right? And they'd be correct in assuming if we just pluck out 1 or 2 of these things from this report, it's not gonna make a big difference. Okay? But in an interconnected framework, in the aggregate, this money adds up. Adds up. Plus, we have to remember that the goal is not only to achieve safe and sound schools, it's to keep them in that condition once we get them there. Okay? It's not to get somebody there and then they start to go down. This requires a change in approach, or 25 years from now, another commission will be reporting the same issues. And if you go back to the 1997 commission report, in their lead-in, we put it in our report, you could just transfer it to today. They would just describe the same issues. Not that good things didn't come out of that report, it did, in terms of actions, but the issues were the same. As mentioned, the executive order asks the commission to examine if the school building finance authority would benefit the state, school administrative units, and municipalities. The commission concluded that such an authority is not needed in Maine. This is due to the existence and excellent work of the Maine Bond Bank, Maine Health and Higher Educational Facilities Authority, entities such as MDOE, Bureau of General Services, and others, state and local. We did, however, conclude, that's okay, need to get it?
No.
Please feel free to. You need to get up and walk around the room anyway, feel free to. You can move about the cabin. I honestly, really, just the coffee's there, so like, please, just feel free to move. We did conclude that streamlined, quasi-independent entity is needed to convene, coordinate, develop, monitor, and report on the essential activities that are not happening now, and that in the conclusion of the majority of the commission members cannot happen in any existing state agency. They're just not suited to be within a state agency. So, the commission proposed the creation of an entity, gave it a name, the Intergovernmental Office of School Infrastructure, not just construction, infrastructure. It would be different from anything that we have now. The intergovernmental aspect of this is really important. As put by Commission Member Roy Gott, who represented local school boards on the commission, we are in this together. I agree with that, and our structure and our governance should reflect that fact. So what do we mean by a new entity? You know, I've already heard some like, we don't need some bureaucracy or something, you know, wow, we'll create something else. We've heard a lot of sort of rumors about this. When you read the report, you'll see we're talking about a 6-person office, right? Massachusetts, I heard our friend here from temporarily living in Boston, Massachusetts School Building Finance Authority has 100 members. That's in addition to their 450 members in their Department of Education. Yes, they have 1,800 schools. We have 600 though. This isn't a small number of schools here. A 6-person office. This is a team that would spearhead the type of long-term approach that we identified in the report. Brings together all involved in a new way. This group remains abreast of new developments and possibilities that could make a difference for some districts. For example, districts across the country, some of them are taking advantage of opportunity zones and building around their schools the kinds of supports that would benefit their schools. Workplace, library, childcare, other kinds. Using the opportunity zone tax credit. All of you are probably familiar with opportunity zones, but you may not have been familiar with the fact that the state has just redesignated what those opportunity zones are. I don't know if all of you were involved in that conversation. You should be. Because it has to do with the economic vibrancy of communities, particularly those that are low income, right? E3s are being used in other states, public-private partnerships, with some real success. We have people who say, that will never work here, it can't work here, shouldn't happen here. I would ask you to keep an open mind for these things. It probably isn't suitable for all districts in Maine, but it may be something that really works quite well for others, right? And we've seen this happen in other places. Even if the overall savings aren't there over the long term, I'm not sure they're not, these schools get built faster. So, this entity would stay abreast of those new developments. They would make sure that all of these strands are interconnected. The entity would not take over responsibilities already being done by somebody else. Take over the bond bank's responsibilities, or HEFA's responsibilities, or DOE's responsibilities. Without them. It would be governed by a board, including the Commissioner of the Maine Department of Education, probably the Commissioner of the Department of Admin and Finance, the Chair of the State Board of Education, a superintendent, a municipal representative. When you look in the report, you'll see the list of proposed members on this board. We believed, the majority of the commission believes, that intergovernmental piece of this is hugely important to the eventual solution. not just the state over here and the locals over here and the property, you know, this really has to be a combined effort. Another thing I should mention, that group, let me just back up a second, that group, the board would be backed up by a technical team, architects, engineers, all of that, so these pieces would all have technical support. And the purpose of that group is really to map out and implement the long-term plan. How do you get from where we are today to all schools in Maine being safe and sound? How do you do? That group is responsible for that, responsible for reporting out on that. It's responsible for the results, reporting those results. And importantly, that group transcends state administration. Governors and commissioners come and go. Local elected officials and school boards come and go. There needs to be an entity that is the champion for school infrastructure. You have a champion for housing. You have a champion for roads and bridges. Who's the champion? Where's that unified voice for school infrastructure statewide? This is that group. They keep it on the front burner through one administration after the other. I should note that we had two members of the commission who absolutely oppose the creation of any new entity. And in this process that we set up with the commission, you're very clear from the outset. You disagree, we put it in the report. That's fine. There's disagreement, we'll note it. Talk about what that is. That's okay. So we had two members who oppose the creation of the new entity, preferring to have any new staff located at the Maine Department of Education. Not unreasonable. Okay. Some states have, like Maine, have their sort of all of this run through their Department of Education. It's not unreasonable thought. The majority of commission members, though, as I said before, concluded that without an independent, quasi-independent entity, the kind of comprehensive approach we're talking about won't happen. Can't happen. Don't believe it will happen, right? And that's with all due respect to all the state agencies involved. Their amazing expertise, their diligence, the outstanding work that they do. This is a bit of a different animal. This is a statewide, not just state government issue. Although we have blessed with existing excellent elements and dedicated staff, well, here today, the current approach is piecemeal and siloed. Not their fault. It's the way the system operates. You implement this statute, you implement that statute, stay in that lane. So this isn't the fault of anyone. We make that very, very clear in the report. It's just the manner in which it's organized. The current system also does not address the whole of the problem, nor leverage all of the elements that could be leveraged to contribute to the solution. Infrastructure investment involves financial decisions, that span many decades. The good news, there's good news here, is that infrastructure is somewhat predictable. We know the lifespan of buildings and equipment. We know the financial benefit, for example, of addressing deferred maintenance. These aren't things we don't know. We know these things. School infrastructure is, I think, somebody here may correct me, I think it's second only in cost or size to roads and bridges. It's a huge imprint made on school infrastructure. But at the moment, as I mentioned, there's no unified place where that comes to light. So where do we go from here? As you know, making changes in systems, processes, and organizations is very challenging. We're just moving somebody's desk in their office. You sit over here and sit over here. For many reasons, including good reasons, there can be substantial resistance. Sometimes the barriers are turf or control. Sometimes the current state, problematic as it might be, is at least known, right? Something we know. Sometimes it's inertia. Sometimes it's personal. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes it's just hard to do. And sometimes it's not a good concept. Or a good concept, but absent good planning on the implementation side, right? There's a lot of reasons not to do anything. The bigger the system, the bigger the challenge. The more owners of an issue, in this case state and local, the more complex solution. Change in state government has its own set of challenges. As you mentioned, leadership comes and goes. They bring in different priorities, different levels of expertise. Everybody waits while the new group gears up. Let's see what their priorities are. Let's wait and see kind of stuff. Legislature is the same. And the work is governed by a political process, by its nature, the legislature, that can have a tendency, I'm reaching here, but there's a tendency for short-term action, not long-term. Where do we need to be in 25 years? Where's the path to get there? Right? Shorter-term actions are more the province for legitimate reasons. We understand that. Rather than a long-term measurable plan. In the private sector, organizations are more likely to evolve simply to survive. In the private sector, in some organizations, you don't evolve, you may not be there the next year. You may not survive. It's not always the case in the public sector, right? This $11 billion problem didn't just crop up. It's been building for decades. It wasn't like we discovered this. We have a problem, right? It's been building for decades, more longer than that. All that said, I know from my own experience in state government that change, even in big systems, is possible. But it requires two things. It requires leadership, and it requires a sound, intuitive concept that is built with implementation in mind, not divorced from implementation, around which support can be developed. It needs those two things. The big systems change to really take hold. Continuing to discuss this commission's report as you're doing today is important. Leadership could come from the governor or legislature or both, but it doesn't only have to come from state government. It could come from groups like MaineASBO or a coalition of municipalities and districts, along with other groups such as chambers of commerce. It has to come from you. It's not going to come from our commission, our grouping as they are. It has to come from the ground. It could come from the top, but only have to come from the top. I know that many members of the commission would be very happy to remain involved in those discussions. Many of them are involved in the work, so they all play a role in schools or school infrastructure. The majority of commission members believe fully in these recommendations. They believe in the need for a new approach. They also believe that pick and choosing individual recommendations in the report to say, we like this one, but not this one, we like this one, but not this one, it's over. That's game over, right? This has to be a unified, comprehensive approach, not, we'll see if we like stuff that's in there. You know, all of the things that are in there should be under consideration. Not all of them necessarily are priorities or will be implemented in the short run, but they should all be on the radar screen. And others will emerge in the future, right? As we go, other opportunities will emerge. If we don't take a more comprehensive approach, I think the majority of the commission fully believes if we only make progress at the margins, we could end up substantially in the same position. The problem is growing faster than the solution. So I want to close with two quotes. One is an observation of the report by Janet Fairman, who is the MEPRI co-director. And given MEPRI's close understanding of these issues, I think her observation about the work is important. I want to share it with you. We commend the Commission's work to produce this very substantive and compelling report. The writing is clear and accessible and provides strong evidence to support the conclusions and recommendations, which will be important for generating broad-based support and action. The 4 broad objectives are spot on, and the strategies offered to obtain those goals are reasonable, feasible, and multi-layered and have been used elsewhere with success. Developing a statewide master plan is absolutely critical, and the idea of a new entity that brings together multiple stakeholders to develop that plan and oversee implementation and financing would position the state to truly make progress towards the broader goals. The quote from that. One other quote I wanted to close with is from the esteemed member of the commission, Hollis. She is quoted on page 25 of the report. We'll talk to her about it next time you see her. Here's what Hollis said. We need to keep an eye on the waves crashing on shore while also watching the 5th wave out to sea. That's it in a nutshell. That's really the commission's report in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can. I'd be equally happy to listen to any of your perspectives on the topic, whether agree, disagree, or listen to all of it. So I'd open it up. If we have a few minutes, I don't know if we have any time left, but we have a few minutes for questions or comments.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So where does this report end up as far as, does it go to the legislature for action? Is there a bill? What's the next step for this report?
You know, that's a really good question. I think it's going, we're at a juncture that there was a bill, 1892, that tacked on something about the commission's report as an amendment. Wasn't exactly what the commission had recommended in terms of an action. I don't know where that stands. I haven't heard. It was tied to, I'm sure you're familiar with 1892, which is a large appropriations bill for school funding. And there was a tiny piece in there about the, and that basically, that piece said something to the effect of, we'll have a working group, they'll get together, review the commission's recommendations and report back to the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee and Appropriations Committee. I'm not a fan of that. I didn't want to see it to go back into another group. For what the commission had recommended was that a small working group be formed only to surface what would this entity cost, what would they do, because that's the big question, right? And so that was the point of the working group in the report was we just need to give decision makers information so that they know what this is. What's the cost? How could it be funded? What would the responsibilities be? How does it link to all these other groups? That's what we recommended, not to have all of these recommendations revisited, which, by the way, isn't possible to do in the space of a few months anyway. I mean, our hope was that an entity would be created and then they really take the lead in trying to move forward and triage all of this information. So, to your question about where does it go, it could be in a bill in the next new legislature. And I think that will take some work on the part of groups like this and others to talk with them, about why this is important. Other comments with that, or indifferent, or question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, in magnitude, how much is the state spending annually to support like the debt service portion of whatever they forgive for projects like high schools that are built and also the revolving renovation?
You know you have Paula Gravel at your table, right? You're aware of this, right?
You told me to ask you that question.
And normally in my remarks, I say, when you have questions about debt service, refer them to Paula Gravel. And Paula has included in the report, by the way, and I'd urge all of you to, I know it's got more than enough to read, but there's a lot of information in that report, including tables that Paula had put together around this debt service. So there's a ton of it, 70 pages, there's a ton of information in there. Paolo, you want to take this?
Absolutely. So I can help with one part of that. I can't help with the second, but you can look it up. I'm sure it's in. As far as the current state share of construction, school construction, major school construction, that right now, I want to say in FY27 is being funded at 112. Oh, you all can hear me? No, at 112. Is it on? $112 million is the current bonded portion of approved state funding for major capital construction. The ceiling right now is 150 million. So that gap is because, and those of you that have been part of projects understand this, it takes a while even after you're approved from that list to actually get up and running and get bonded. And so, and we have to stagger the bonding and the project because we can't go over that ceiling, that limit ceiling right now, which is 150 million. So those that have bonded for 20 years are in that cost. As well as those that are about to bond and will have a payment. So the 112 million that I think, it's either 112 or 114 million in the current FY27 cost of education are for all those that are within their 20-year payments. So that's the 1-year principal and interest payments for all the current projects that are still being funded, as well as any new ones that come up, we add to it. So every year, some of those 20-year projects drop off because the payments are complete. That's a celebration. I can't wait for my mortgage to be done. That's still a long time away. Probably I'm dead. That's somebody else's problem. But then, so some drop off and then others come in, but it's the annual payments that are included. So that's what that 114 million is. So there is a gap, but we can't ask for the money enough from the legislature in our budget of costs unless it's actually going to be a payment that gets out. So some people are like, well, why don't we get all that money and put it into this new account that is recommended? Well, because we're not allowed. There actually has to be a reason to spend the money. However, I think that's part of the discussion that we've talked about quite a bit during this discussion. As far as the revolving renovation fund, I apologize. I don't know that. That's Scott Brown and Ann Panette's area of expertise, and I don't have that in my head.
I would add on the revolving renovation fund, though, and you see this in the report, you know, we get locked into statutes and processes that are really well designed and extremely well managed. There's no question about that. But they can be self-limiting. So, for example, to be able to, if really getting at this deferred maintenance, if that not only improves health and safety, but allows us to knock down this longer-term cost, why aren't we able to target monies to that? And that's part of this master plan that we've talked about. It, you know, again, this intergovernmental group that says we want to get rid of mold in all 200 facilities that we see it in, and we want to target our resources to that for the next 2 years, for example. Right? Right now, we're sort of locked into new schools, certain criteria for revolving renovation fund, and that's that, right? So the strategic aspect of it can get lost, right? And I don't think that we want any one group, whether it's state government or local government, be figuring all that out on their own, right? That's why the intergovernmental approach, I think, really has a lot of merit to make those determinations. Any other questions or comments? Anything that you've heard about this at all? Is this the first that, have you been hearing about this? Yep, you have Hollis on your group, so. Have you heard anything positive about it? Or? Is there anything? Yes.
So I just wanted to offer up that I serve on the board for the bond bank, and so I'm familiar with this process. And I'm pleased to hear that the final report essentially is not trying to recreate that work that the bond bank does. But I'm curious, just from the folks in the room, what your experience has been if you've gone through the revolving renovation fund obviously you have to be approved and on the list for the Department of Education, but then you come to the bond bank to finalize. Has that process been smooth? Has that worked for you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Because it seems like it works on our end, on the board, but I'm curious to hear how it is on your end.
And that's really that, all those nodding heads are the reason why the commission concluded, we don't need a school building finance authority. And Anthony Giacomo sat on the commission and really looked at the Maine bond bank, and the Keeper does is superb. And so we don't need to recreate that one. Okay, I'm going to say thank you, Matt. Please feel free to be in touch at any office or directly. I think this is a discussion that needs to continue. Otherwise, you know what will happen to this report, right? We all know. And it used to go on a shelf, but now it's just in a digital archive, probably somewhere. And 25 years from now, the governor will say, hey, we need a commission. So let's do something with this, if we can. So, thank you very much.
Okay, so we're at the business part of our meeting. We need to adopt our meeting minutes. So I will entertain.
Actually,
a motion.
if I may, Madam Chair, we have to establish that we do have a quorum.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
It is 12:36. And now we need a motion for the minutes.
Yes. Could I have a motion for the minutes, please?
Sherry,
So Sherry,
Second.
second.
who seconded? I'm sorry. Shout it out. Hey.
Carol did.
Excellent.
Carol, okay, great.
Okay, could we have a show of hands for approval of the minutes, please? All right, so passed, so moved. Treasurer's report.
Do we want to put the treasurer's report?
Did everybody get a copy of the treasurer's report? Okay, great.
Should have.
I have it in front of me. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report, please?
So moved.
Kelly?
Yeah.
And a second.
Second.
Double. Any questions on the treasurer's report? Just mention that we have a total ending balance of $38,607 in our account. Sounds like a lot, but. Okay. Okay, hands to approve. Okay, excellent. So moved. Committee reports. Okay, anything from professional development? Have we met? Then, no, okay, we haven't met. I think that we have asked membership to give us some topics for future meetings. We are actually already working on our September meeting in Augusta and at the Elks again. And as of right now, we have a couple of people lined up. MaineASBO is going to come and do their report on their new software system that they're currently working on. So they'll be at our meeting. And then MEA Benefits Trust is going to send Jennifer Kent to come to our meeting as well. So anybody that has anything that they'd like in the Augusta area for speakers, anybody from the state, just shoot us an email if you have an interest in a topic. We still have room for other things in that meeting in Augusta in September. Okay, Tri-State. Kelly? Since
I'll put a plug in for Tri-State again. You guys heard me at the last meeting. It's May 20 to May 22. It's in Burlington, Vermont this year. If you are interested in registering, the deadline to register is May 1st. And you can visit tristateasbo.org to actually find the link there. Again, it's a perfect time for networking, professional development, and just having some fun with each other every once in a while after all of the PD's over.
Thank you. Legislative. Anything, Zach, on the legislative front that we need to be aware of?
The only thing I think out there that we haven't just discussed here is the whole anti-pinch devices on school buses, which I believe is part of the governor's supplemental budget, so I don't know how that gets passed through the process and whether they trim or add things. But if you don't have buses that have the anti-pinch device, the law would require them at some point, and then this would, there's supposed to be some funds there to help districts do it, so that's one thing that everybody has transportation will probably be aware of. Your newer buses already should be coming with them, so if you got a bus in like this year, or maybe last year, probably already has it, because the law went into effect a couple years ago, but this makes it mandatory for what would have been, legacy or grandfathered as to not needing them.
Do you know if you contract your transportation, or is it coming available to the contractor?
I don't know that. I just know there's like a line in her budget that's like, oh, 1.7 million or something like that to help districts get anti-pinch devices, and I don't know how that would be.
Okay, excellent. We are going to just talk a little bit further about a topic that came up at our last meeting, and that is the executive committee has been talking about changing the due structure. Some of you in this room already heard the discussion, but I wanted to bring it up again because we are proposing a new due structure starting this coming year for our membership. The due structure would be based on the size of the school, and it would also be based on not individual memberships, but it would be based on membership for your entire business office. So basically, your dues would not only cover yourself, the business manager, or whoever, it would cover the payroll person, the HR person in the central office. There's several reasons why we want to do this. One of them obviously is to raise more revenues. We have a budget of roughly $80,000 a year, and we have not been able to, up until this point, to raise enough revenues to support our budget. So we've been dipping into fund balance for the last several years, and we just at this point are at the phase where we have to get more revenues coming in through dues, and also we'd like to have more membership if possible as well. So this kind of solves two different things.
So still looking for it. Give me a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. From memory, the basic dues for the smallest school, if anybody can remember on our team, was I think up to 500 students would be $475. That would be the membership for the smallest school system. And then the biggest school system, which would be like 2,000 plus students, I think, Zach, was it 800?
I don't know, we talked about so many options.
850, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So there was a range from starting at 475 or 450 up to 850 roughly. And there was 4 tiers, and I have a slide to show you.
No, I'm sorry. I'm working on it.
Okay, we'll get to the slide. I guess at this point, I'd be really interested in getting some comments. We got some really good feedback last meeting in Herman, and anybody that wants to give a comment would be welcome at this point, because we want to listen to the members. We don't want to lose members because of the dues, but we also you probably understand that we need to have the revenue to support the organization as we move forward. So, thoughts on this new due structure?
Yeah, one.
Anybody? Adam?
I'll just chime in that I think it looks fair, and I know we as probably someone who'd be at the top tier would support that, because I think it's important to make sure that the organization is sustainable and do what it wants to do. So I weigh in with a positive.
Jen?
I would probably weigh in with positive with being more of a lower tier people.
Okay.
And it's hard to get like, payroll, HR, or AP person to come. They can't justify a whole day away. Like my payroll person would love to, the person at me this afternoon, but she's like, I just have too much to do.
Yes, I get
In
it.
the morning that I can justify it.
Right.
So I was, you know.
Yeah, it is hard to get your whole office here, for sure. I think one of the reasons we want to be able to have the central office staff have the ability to come to our meetings, even if they can't come to every meeting, because there's going to be topics that some people, it really would reach to them, and there are business managers that don't come to our meetings because it's not something they really want to listen to, but it could be that their HR person does. So it's kind of difficult. Go ahead.
I'm in agreement, it's hard to get the other staff here for a full day, so perhaps considering doing a remote login option if, you know, through tech, so that people could, like in your experience, you know, for that situation,
Yeah, I think
log
we're showing
into that
one yet
piece.
before. Just that summary page, probably better than the
Chris?
I'll let that be.
I like, the idea of being able to include more of my office stuff, that we were having a conversation earlier about retirement. And I and my payroll person who's been in the job for like a number of years are just a year apart, both in our early 60s, and we don't plan on working forever. And neither of us has a job where somebody could step in and shadow for a few weeks and do it. And so I'm looking at succession building and or succession planning, so that's how it's going to better prepare for the
I think, Jerry, like, one of the things that my staff has benefited from, whether or not they can come to the meeting, is that they're getting the newsletters, they have access to the MaineASBO site, where we're posting all of the information and the listserv. So I think those are the benefits my office is seeing, and I'm probably gonna beat a little bit of Zach's drum here, whereas all of these meetings are free to us, right? I mean, there are other organizations who we all pay memberships for other administrators within our district, but then we're paying a fee for them to go to trainings on top of that, to that same membership. So I think that's the other important piece, like when you're presenting the increase, which I'm gonna be on the increase side as well, as one of the larger districts, is that's my justification.
Okay. Sybil?
So just to, as one of the smaller, because it's just me. Literally, single person office. You know, obviously I'll be on the increase end, but I also know that I can pass that off to my superintendent director or the assistant director or the admin assistant. And so having that option is always great because then all of that information can get out. Communication is key.
Yep.
And this way, you can just have it in one space and I can show it where it needs to be shown.
Yep. Yep.
I can second that. I'm usually in my office. The amount of time that this organization saves me from having to figure everything out elsewhere is so beneficial because I don't have that amount of time to spend being the only one in the office. So to me, it is worth every hour.
Yeah, I'm the only one in my office as well. I mean, we have a part-time person that helps out a little bit, but generally I'm the only one as well because I'm in a small school. But the networking and the peer support, I think the peer support is number one for me because I can reach out and call a fellow business manager or email a fellow business manager or a business office person and get that answer really quickly. You know, calling a support line for AptiFund isn't always the best, easiest thing to do, and to call somebody and get some help is excellent. So.
We were supposed to call somebody other than you.
It's all right. Okay, I know this has been a tough topic, but we have a Dave Holden Award presentation, and I'm really excited by this, except for the fact the person that's getting the award couldn't be here. So, because of a family emergency. So, do you want me to go ahead and?
Do you want me to read it or do you want to do it?
Yeah, why don't you do it, Mike?
Sure.
I think last year it was Joanne. So let Mike do the honors.
Oh. John's getting his objects that throw already. See, it's always a bummer. So this is from, sorry, which one it's called?
Dave Holden.
No. This is the Steve.
No,
Oh,
no.
Okay, well then, it's my honor, it's my pleasure to present this year's Dave Holden Award to a very deserving business manager who has been a part of MaineASBO for a very long time. She has and continues to be a committed and passionate professional who exemplifies the standards of this prestigious award. This individual has been intimately involved with the Tri-State Committee, representing Maine well, and always stepping in to do whatever is needed. Colin asked for her to serve on the Governor's Commission for School Construction, and she did not hesitate to be a voice for all business officials in this important commission. It is with great pride I present to the 2026 Dave Holden Award to Hollis Cobb.
So we will get in touch with Hollis and get her plaque and thank her very much for serving. MaineASBO board elections. We have a nomination for a new board member who is replacing Mark Bouchard. And that is Natasha Winslow, right?
She's over there.
Oh, wait, where is she? Oh, there you are, sorry. Looking at the wrong table. So, could you just stand up? So Natasha's gonna be our Northern Maine representative, and we're very excited to welcome her on the board. And also, we have Kelly coming back for another term. So, those are our two people that I'm bringing forward for our board elections. So could I have a nomination, Sybil? And a second?
I'm gonna nominate both of them.
Okay, great. Chris is second.
Nominate everybody.
Okay, and could we have a show of hands, please? Excellent. So moved. Welcome, Natasha. New business.
Any new business? See none.
None?
Oh,
Okay.
new business.
Does Hollis know yet? Okay, so we should not email her this afternoon.
Yeah, we're gonna have to call Hollis. I did not realize she wasn't gonna be here today until just today.
Actually email her and tell her that we have nominated her for something. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay, so, old business.
See none.
See none, okay. So this meeting is now adjourned and
We need a motion to adjourn.
move on. What motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, sorry.
Second.
Second,
Go.
all right, so moved, okay.
And we are adjourned at 12:53.
Okay, so we have, one more sponsor, is that correct?
I think actually everybody's had a chance to speak,
Okay,
haven't they?
great. So Kathleen, you are up. Do you want to discuss or do you want to do the post?
I'll see it later. Okay. Hi. Can you hear me? No.
The handheld one worked better.
All right, I'll use the handheld. And then I'll try not to throw it. Okay, awesome. One day, huh? It is still raining for those of you who have not been outside. And I didn't bring a coat, so hopefully in the next hour it stops. I'm Kathleen Wade, if I don't know you. I'm an attorney at Drummond Woodsum, and I am primarily an employment attorney. So if you called me or you see me, I'm usually talking about unemployment stuff, like bargaining issues or lead issues. Obviously my favorite thing to talk about over and over and over and over and over. So I thought today I'd talk to you about leave issues over and over and over. So I'm generally going to give you just an update about employment laws. Before I get into paid family medical leave,
I wanted to talk about two other updates that I thought might apply to this group, because I've gotten some questions from business managers in particular about these things, but you can tell me if you're not interested in them. The first one is, I wanted to talk about the big beautiful bill and taxes, the tax on overtime. Everybody feel like they have this covered, or would it be helpful to sort of just touch base about that real quick?
Touch base.
Let's touch base. Okay, great. So, beginning in 2025 tax year, employees can take a deduction from their tax liabilities for qualified overtime. You might recall that originally we were not quite sure what qualified overtime was going to be or how this was going to work, and we have received some additional clarity on this. For the W-2s that you issued in 2025, you were not required to tell employees how much qualified overtime they had, but for 2026, you are required to tell them how much qualified overtime they have. So if you don't have a system in place to track this, you're going to want to put a system in place. The trick here is that for schools in particular, the overtime that counts as qualified overtime is only overtime required by the Fair Labor Standards Act, the federal wage and hour law. Which is great, except for that you provide probably other things that you're calling overtime that are not required under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So I want to talk about a couple of examples of what that includes. For my examples, because I am horrendous at math, I'm going to assume, and I've written out the numbers specifically so I don't mislead anybody, just to be super clear. I'm going to assume that you have somebody who's working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, so exactly 40 hours is their work schedule. So in my first example, where I see schools who are giving more than what is required by federal law, is that sometimes schools are giving things like they're counting holidays, sick leave, or school closures, or other sort of times where people are not working but are receiving pay towards the hours worked for overtime purposes. So if I, Kathleen Wade, am working for you, and on Monday it's a holiday, and I get 8 hours of pay for that, and on Tuesday I work 2 extra hours, so that by the end of the week I've worked 42 hours, if you pay me overtime for those 2 hours, that is not qualified overtime. Because you are not legally required to pay those 2 hours as overtime because they have not actually worked 40 hours in the work week. Second example, folks who are giving double pay or call-in or reporting pay. So if you call me in because we've got a storm, and if I have to come in my off hours, you're giving me double time or you're giving me 1.5 times my pay, that is not going to count as qualified overtime. So you need to have a system in place to separate that out for purposes of tracking how much qualified overtime someone is actually working. The last one is a little bit trickier, and these are just the most common ones I see, although I'm interested to hear from you about what else you're doing where you're providing that like extra pay. But the other most common one I see is a shift differential. So this one actually is going to be included. And essentially what happens is, particularly for like custodial staff or things like that, people may have like $1 extra an hour for folks who work the night shift, let's say. So let's say everybody who works first shift gets $19 an hour, and everybody who works the third shift gets $20 an hour. If you work overtime that week, that shift differential is included in the regular rate of pay. So the overtime for the person working for $20 an hour is $30 an hour. And so instead of the $19 an hour times 1.5, you're actually doing the $20 an hour times 1.5 to get the $30. That is qualified overtime. That is going to count for tax purposes. So things like shift differentials will be included when you calculate the amount of qualified overtime. Questions about what qualifies and what doesn't qualify for overtime? Yeah.
And then second example, just explain why that one doesn't qualify.
The double pay or reporting pay. So if I work, this is a good question. So if I work, if I come in and I'm on Monday, there's a storm, and I come in 2 hours early, and let's say I get double pay for that at my rate of $20 an hour, because this one I don't have my math written down for. So I'm getting $40 for each of those hours. By the end of the week, if I still work my regular schedule, I will actually have worked 2 extra hours of overtime, but those were at the rate of $30 an hour. And so the $40 an hour I got for the call-in pay was extra and special because it was on Monday. It wasn't overtime hours. But the $30 by the time I actually worked 42 hours was qualified. So that will count, while the 2 hours of call-in pay won't. What if the call-in pay is the overtime hours, but you're paying double for it? Still only the $30, right? So if you're actually paying $40 for that time because you agreed to pay double time when you call somebody in off shift, they're only getting the qualified amount, which is the 1.5 times their regular rate. That's $30 an hour. So you need to be able to separate out and figure out where you're paying over and above what the law requires. Other questions about qualified overtime? Just to sort of finish out this topic, when you go to report this in 2026, I don't know if it's a numbers thing or if I think it's going to be a money thing. How much money was it actually that they got as the qualified overtime? There's a maximum. It's $12,500 for single filers, $25,000 for joint filers. Our friend working the night shift, let's say, that gets that $20 an hour, works 100 hours of overtime in 2026. Their deduction is going to be $10,000 because the pay that they got for the overtime was that $10. It's the 0.5 they get on top of their regular pay, and so that $10 times 100 hours is $10,000. That's the amount that's going to go on their W-2. Yes.
Since the amount that they can claim is affected by their filing status, is that going to be what they've claimed on their W-4? Or is that going, like, they could earn a bunch, and I don't know how many kids they have and all that other stuff, like, well, I do, but I'm not gonna look it up.
I think what you're gonna do is you're gonna report how much total amount they've made as overtime, and then they get to figure out with their tax advisors how much they can take as a deduction based on their situation.
Okay, that's what I would assume. Thank you.
I did my taxes for the first time ever this year, and won't be doing it again. So too many tax questions, it's too many tax questions for me. So the key takeaway for me for this thing is that if you have those extra and above, you're paying anything over what you're legally required to pay for overtime, you should probably have a system now to be tracking what is and isn't legally required so that you'll be able to just sort of run that at the end of the year a little bit easier. I just learned that we didn't at Drummond Woods know about this, and we pay overtime if you work more than 37 hours in a work week, which is great. We have not been tracking it, so now we got to go back. Luckily, we're only 3 months in, so things like that you want to be able to start tracking now. Okay, you want to talk about earned paid leave?
Oh, we love it.
So exciting! Okay, so I talked about earned paid leave, I think with this same group a couple of months ago. And I think at the time I said it was a mess. Good news. It's still a mess. I still have no idea, right? No, I have a little bit of an idea. So this is what I can tell you. And let me say this before I tell you what I'm going to say. If you have worked with Tom or Michael or Connor or somebody who has looked at specifically what you're doing in your collective bargaining agreements, trust their advice, right? I'm not trying to say anything different than what those guys have said in the bargaining, at the bargaining table after looking at what you're actually providing. If you've only heard from the union about what EPL requires, I think you should listen to my advice. That would be my recommendation, sorry. So this is what I think you have to do by law. By law, you must allow carryover of unused EPL hours. You must. This was kind of a non-issue before if you front-loaded because it was 40 hours, right? And so who cares if you carry over? It goes away anyway. But by law, you must allow carryover. By law, the carryover of last year's hours, and only last year's hours, cannot affect this year's accrual. So, the only thing the law says is if you accrue 40 hours one year and you don't use them, I have to be allowed to carry those forward to next year and to get a new 40 hours. It does not tell me what happens in year 3. It does not tell me what happens to use in year 2. Can I still use more than 40 hours? It does not say. I think it's implied. The Department of Labor has added to their website, I think I told you this in I don't know when that was, October. But they had a little bullet point on their website that said there was no reason why you had to allow more than 40 hours of use in a year. I took a screenshot, and they took that down. So my screenshot's not very helpful to me anymore. Now, that same bullet point says something like, you are not able to limit the use of accrued hours in any year. That's not what the law says, friends. Okay? I don't think that's what it requires. It requires you to allow people to accrue up to 40 hours, to carry over those 40 hours, and not that carryover not affect their accrual in the next year. The very next year, and not the third year, just the next year. So if at the end of year 2 people have 80 hours, I don't think you're carrying over 80 hours. I think you're carrying over 40 hours. Until and unless they change it. And until and unless they change their regulations here, because their regulations still say 40 hours is all that's required. This is a little controversial, but I'm going to now tell you who has the best policies here. If you have a collective bargaining agreement or a policy that says the first 40 hours of leave taken for any reason qualify as EPL, you have the best policy. Ding, ding, ding. How many people have that? Don't get rid of it. Don't let them tell you to get rid of it. Don't get rid of it. The reason why is because almost everybody is going to use 40 hours of leave at some point during the year. You don't have to worry about carryover from a practical perspective. Maybe you've got that gold star employee who does not use their full 40 hours for some reason during that year, and that person will have carryover, but almost everybody is gonna have 40 hours of leave that they use for some reason. People get sick, people have to take whatever time off, they need personal stuff happens. Yep.
So, our teachers are allowed to use 2 days out of their sick time for EPL purposes. But if they don't use it, it gets put back into sick time, so they don't have any carry.
This is not the gold star policy. This is the very common policy that is unfortunately now a little bit confusing. And the reason why, this is the other kind of policy I see, right? So the other kind of policy is either we provide flexible use of sick time to comply with this, or whatever we do, or we specifically say that 3 of these days or 5 of these days are EPL, or we even have specifically EPL. There is an argument, and my understanding is that someone from the Maine Education Association now has an email from the Department of Labor that says this, that time rolls over and is available on the same terms as EPL in future years. Meaning, even though normally, like if you just said flexible use of 40 hours of sick leave, and they don't use all of their sick leave, and they don't use any of it flexibly, next year they have an argument that the Department of Labor has signaled they might agree with them on, that they now have 80 hours of flexible use time. My friend Connor, you guys know my friend Connor, has heard at the bargaining table that teachers should be allowed to take this time for vacation. That EdTech should be able to use this time for vacation, right? They know what it says. They know how they're interpreting it. They have their email from the Department of Labor, right? My best argument for you, first of all, this is one of the few times I think we get to take the moral high ground in bargaining, right? We get a lot of, depending on who your union is, right? A lot of like, you don't value us, and especially you all with the money, right? Come on, give us what we're worth. We do think you're worth a lot. Please, be here when kids are here, right? We can't allow the use of EPL for this purpose. You can take a little bit of the same approach that you sometimes get on the opposite side here. We cannot allow 80 hours to be used flexibly for you to go on vacation when kids are in the classroom. You know, you don't necessarily have to be the messenger for it. Figure it out with your superintendent. Don't tell him I said that. Don't tell her I said that, right? But I think it's fair for us to take this position that we need you in the classroom, that really it wasn't intended for this purpose. We have still made the argument that things like it creates an undue burden when kids are in the classroom for you to be able to take leave. We'll see, right? Tom has a couple of arbitrations he's going to go to over it. I hear the MEA has hired outside attorneys outside of Maine to help with this purpose, right? So we'll see how all of that goes. But right now, I think you still take the position that 80 hours is too much to be used flexibly. Yep.
So our collective bargaining agreement is that we front load the 40 hours. And then there's a statement in there, it's very specific. If we have any EPL time left over, based on this table, it's converted into sick time and rolled over that way. If that's in the collective bargaining agreement, how do you dial that back and deal with it's now we're not going to roll it over as sick leave, it has to be rolled over as EPL?
I would probably continue to roll it over as sick leave and just try to make the argument when they go to take 2 weeks of vacation next year that rolled over as sick leave and we just can't do more than that. Because I still think the law doesn't say anything about requiring you to allow it to be used, even though you're allowed to accrue a new set. That's a little tricky, you know what I mean? I don't actually think that was the purpose of the change to the law. And so, but to me, it's worth arguing over, at least to a certain level in terms of agreements, because we can't allow vacation mid-year when you gotta have people out of the classroom and when you have paid leave coming, right? Paid family medical leave. I'm hearing a lot of people complaining about having to cover other people's duties during their prep time and all of these different things. That's only gonna get worse, right? If we have people out for fun. It's tough. It's a tough job. There are downsides to every job. The downside to this job is you really can't take vacation when kids are in the classroom. And that's the truth for all of the positions pretty much that we hire, right? So I would go ahead and still have it carry over as sick leave, but keep in mind that if they went to the Department of Labor over it, a really push came to shove, somebody was trying to take, let's say, 60 hours for vacation, you might lose it. Yes. Other questions about EPL? If you're bargaining now and you really have the opportunity to do this, think about switching to that gold star policy of EPL is the first 40 hours taken for any reason. I think that's probably the best we're going to do for EPL at this point in time. Yes?
So we're negotiating our support staff contract currently, and the MEA negotiator that pretty much negotiated it on behalf of them said that just because they take time off, they have to say it's EPL time.
Not if your bargaining agreement says the first 40 hours taken for any reason or EPL.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, point me to where it says that, correct? Not in the email from the Department of Labor. They don't need to be emailing the Department of Labor. And I feel good about that, especially if your contract says the first 40 hours taken for any reason. That's what we said, right? This law specifically did not require us to add on to what we were already doing. It made us be more flexible about what we were already doing. And we are doing that, right? Perfect. Questions about EPL? Yeah.
If you have 3 personal days to start with and then the MEA union is pushing for 5 personal days now, what would you say to that?
I still don't think that EPL requires us to give 5 personal days. I would still say that as long as there was an MOU that a lot of people were using for a while, and what that basically says is if we have to be flexible about more time, we will be. And what that means practically is this, right? And I've actually gotten this exact scenario more times than you would think. We have somebody who is out in October. They have the flu, okay? They use the whole week, they use 40 hours of sick time. They still have 3 personal days, whatever it is, right? They want to take a little bit of time on either side of February vacation to go to Disney World. They want to take actually 5 days of time. And they say, I have EPL. Well, no, right? We would have, if that was the first 40 hours that you were using, you would have been able to use those 2 additional sick days flexibly, and we maybe would have had to grant that. But because the first 40 hours of leave that you used were sick leave, we have no obligation to make additional sick time flexible for this purpose. I've also gotten people who go on moose hunts, which is new to me. I am not originally from Maine. In October is when moose hunt season is. That tends to be the first 40 hours, right? They haven't been out, don't like it, and you could probably, fight about it a little bit, but we tend to I have had to grant requests to go on moose hunts in October because the person has not otherwise taken leave, and we had to be flexible about the use of sick time so that we didn't have to argue with the person in front of the Department of Labor.
There's still a provision about creating a hardship though, right?
There is. My understanding is that there's an email from the Department of Labor that says it's not fair of schools to say that it is a hardship because kids are in school. Which, what do they know? You know what I mean? Whatever. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. They can come in and staff the schools then. I'm still comfortable saying it is a hardship when students are in the classroom. We don't have substitutes. We saw all through COVID people having to shut down because they didn't have enough bus drivers. People having to shut down because they didn't have enough people in the classroom, right? You can't meet the services you're required to meet in your IEP. Like, it's a hardship, period, right? I would still take the position until we are very clearly told that we have to stop. You should know what level of risk you're comfortable with. Some folks will be willing to push that further than others, right? At some point, you might give rather than take that to arbitration, but somebody's gonna have to do it eventually. Talk to Tom about that. See how he does, right? We'll learn. Yep.
But you really can't take that position until it's negotiated in contract.
So if you have EPL as separate days, right, you can't take that position.
Yeah.
Though what you've done by negotiating EPL separately is say you have 5 electrical days. And it's, unless you put in the contract that you're going to reject it for certain reasons, I think it's difficult to say, like, this creates an undue hardship at this point. I like it when you said things like only a certain number of people on student days or not on the other side of vacation. I like it when we're clear about what we think is going to constitute a hardship before we have to argue that, no, your particular case does create a hardship. So if especially if the union is insisting on like changing the earned paid leave language, you might insist back on being clear about what things you think create a hardship so that we can try to control this a little bit more than we're able to do now. It's going great. Other questions about EPL? Like I said, if you've talked to Mike, Tom, Connor, Blake, anybody else about EPL and they've looked at your contract, their specific advice about what you have and what you're doing makes more sense for you. But that's my gold star is for the ones that say first 40 hours. I think it's the best one at this point, just because of the rollover language that's new. So if you can get it, great.
So,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's okay.
Our contracts currently say, of the sick leave that you have, we take a certain amount of days and we put it in an EPL bucket so that it can be used in a 1 hour basis. At the end of the year, whatever's unused reverts back to sick leave because that's where we took it from. And our position with the ones that we've negotiated so far has been, no, it is rolling over, but it's rolling over as sick leave. Keep that position until
keep the
you're
position,
challenged.
right? Did everybody in the back hear it? I would keep that position.
Okay.
You should be prepared to be challenged on it.
Well, we have during negotiations, and our position at that time was, well, if you want to carry it over as EPL, you can, but we're going to limit the amount of EPL you can use to that 1 year to 40 hours because we can't let 300 people take 80 hours of EPL every year.
And I still think that is a position you can take in good faith. The Department of Labor has not updated the regulations that go along with paid family medical leave. They'll have to do so eventually. What those regulations currently say is that you don't have to allow more than 40 hours of use in a given year. Their website says something different. The rules still say that. I think you can in good faith say, we only allow 40 hours of EPL use. You are rolling over that time, it's only for sick at that point. I still think that's a good faith position to take. It's a little risky and somebody's gonna call you on it eventually, and we'll just have to figure out what the Department of Labor does about taking inconsistent positions themselves. We'll see. Okay, ready to talk about paid family medical leave? Okay. This is my last topic, so I've saved time for this, guys. All right, we just have 4 weeks to go until paid family medical leave becomes available. My understanding is that applications are available now if you're using the state program, although I checked the website to see today if I could get a copy of the application, and it turns out that AFLAC is closed today for Good Friday. Must be nice. Anyway, so there is an application. You can go on their website. You have to create a login to get to it, and I don't want to do that. So I don't know what it looks like. But there is an application. They ask people information, and they can start applying now. They have a fun video that the state plays that tells you if you know you're going to take leave come May 1, you really ought to tell your employer. Now you need to give 30 days notice of the intent to take planned leave. I know that probably a lot of people have heard about paid leave over and over again, so I won't tell you all of the details unless you want to know them, but generally it's everything that you already heard of for reasons for leave under federal and state law, as well as more categories, right? So taking leave to care for a grandchild with a serious health condition, a grandparent, a sibling, a person with a significant other bond, so on and so forth. It's also paid, obviously, and there's no minimum duration of employment. There's been a little bit of confusion about that piece. No minimum duration of employment. If I start working for you today, you're like, we actually need a paid leave expert on the payroll full time. Kathleen, come work for us today. And I say, yes, I love paid leave. I'd love to be there. On May 1st, I can take paid leave. No minimum duration of employment.
That's based on the having earned $7,000, $800 or whatever.
If I have earned $7,000 in the state in the past year, I am eligible. It's not per employer. It is in the state. Yep. I don't know what happens to people who earn $7,000 out of the state. I don't think it counts. But who knows how they're going to catch that? I'm not 100% sure how they're going to catch that. You need today, if you haven't done this yet, to look at providing notices to new employees. The state has put out sample notices. This has been part of the law since it passed in October of 2023, and there was no, here's when it starts. So technically, I think we were supposed to be providing notice about paid leave since October of 2023. Nobody's done that, and as far as I know, nobody's got in trouble. The state has sample notices depending on whether you're using a private plan or the state plan. Those are on their website, and it's pretty easy to find. In addition, you must have a poster. The poster is also on the state's website. It is important that you do those today if you have not taken a look at those and thought about putting those up for people. In addition, if you are using a private plan, it is a good idea for you to get familiar with how this is going to operate. The state is figuring out how their plan is going to work. You ought to figure out how your plan is going to work. If you have folks asking you questions about how to apply, should they go directly to the carrier or should they go through you to get the information from the carrier, right? Who has the forms? In addition, it is important for you to know a couple of things. Are they going to pay you or are they going to pay the employee the money when they qualify for paid family medical? That's important for things like who's got the obligation for other taxes and contributions and things and how are we tracking it, right? You also should ask, because I just learned this is a thing, if you're using a private carrier, are they going to count the time that somebody has already used in the past year against them? Apparently, even though the rules allow you to reduce the paid family medical leave entitlement come May 1st if somebody has taken federal or state leave in the 12 months preceding the paid family medical leave program, some private carriers are not planning to ask this question. And so you may have somebody who's on leave right now, and you have a private carrier who might be granting them leave, again, full 12 weeks come May 1st. You want to ask that question of your private carrier. Are they going to ask you about that or not? My preference, if they're asking you what you'd like, yes, right? We told people that if they took leave before May 1st, they wouldn't be able to get a new set. I would like to humbly advocate for generally that being the case, right? Are they doing all the reporting for you? You still have reporting obligations under the private plan. What do they need from you to do that? And then figure out this piece about the taxes, obligations, and things like that. As far as I know, the carriers have been pretty good about answering questions about how all of that is going to work. There's like 20 pages of guidance that is, I haven't read. I've asked my friend Chris Stevenson to read it. He has looked at it. So if you have questions about how this interacts with other taxes, about how it interacts with Maine PERS and things like that, Chris generally has your answers, or your carriers might have your answers there. I have 4 things that I want to clarify because I've been to webinars hosted by other folks, and I was like, oh, I really want to clean up that answer. So I'm taking the opportunity to clean those answers up now. But I'm also happy to answer any questions. I have made myself a paid family medical leave binder, and so if I don't know the answer, we can look it up together. Great. Okay, the first one I want to clarify, 120 days. People have heard about 120 days, and there seems to be some confusion about what that means. It is not, once again, that I have to have worked 120 days to qualify for leave. The 120 days references job protection. It is calendar days. I know somebody was unclear about this in a webinar recently. It is calendar days. There is a reference in the law to having to work 120 days to get job protection. So if you've hired me, I start today to be your paid family medical leave expert, and I take leave on May 1st, I'm getting, because I've been employed in Maine before, I am getting paid family medical leave. You are providing my health insurance on the same terms you would to other employers, and you're providing me with PTO or vacation accruals, just like you would if I was working. But you can hire another paid family medical leave expert because you don't have to guarantee that I get my job back at the end of my leave. That's the only difference. If you hire me now and I don't take leave until December, I get the job protection as well. That's the only thing the 120 days is doing, is it allows you to essentially hire somebody to replace them and not guarantee them the same job when they return. Questions about that? Calendar days. Very clearly calendar. The other one that I've seen some confusion over is undue hardship. And the reason why I think there's confusion over this is because undue hardship in paid family medical leave means something different than it means under the ADA. Normally, when you hear the term undue hardship under the ADA, we're saying, oh, you're asking for an accommodation, it would create an undue hardship for us to give that accommodation, and so we don't have to give it. That's not what it means for purposes of paid family medical leave. So I'm going to give an example. If I had a baby, again, you're hiring me, paid family medical leave expert. If I had a baby in February and I took 6 weeks of leave, and I returned to work and said, good news, I'm applying for paid family medical leave on May 1st, I'll just take every Friday. Because I don't have childcare on Fridays, and it is most convenient for me to take this every Friday. I still have 6 weeks of time to do that. This is the perfect time for you as the employer to do the undue hardship. Because what undue hardship means in this case is the timing that you have suggested does not work for me based on your specific job, right? I need you here all week. I can't hire another paid family medical leave expert to be here just on Fridays. I can't hire just another teacher to be on Fridays. The classroom needs you, whatever it is, but you need to make a pitch about why that specific position and that specific timing does not work for you. If it is things like elective surgery, let's say somebody wants knee surgery 2 weeks before the school year ends, right? You are not saying, no, you don't get the surgery, but you can push back and say, we got 2 more weeks before the school year ends. Can they make it 2 more weeks before they have the surgery? It would be really beneficial, and it would actually create hardship if we had to find somebody to fill their position for the last 2 weeks of the school year. You are going to have to make a pitch about their specific job, their specific position, and the timing they have proposed. If a doctor tells you that there is no option to change their surgery or their medical need for leave, you are out of luck. There you go. It is timing-based only. I'm interested, and I don't have an answer for you, but just to pose fun questions, is the parental leave. Under federal family medical leave, we do not have to allow employees to take intermittent leave for the purposes of bonding with a newborn child. We have been able, historically under federal family medical, to say that you need to take it as one chunk so that we don't have people popping in and out of classrooms or their jobs and filling in 1 day a week and things like that. The same language does not appear anywhere in the paid family medical law or rules. So I think that will be a perfect one for schools in particular to allege undue hardship. If people are coming and saying, I need bonding leave to be intermittent, I think you should look at their specific position, but particularly if it's a one working with children, it is going to be almost impossible to fill those jobs on a 1 day a week basis or 2 day a week basis or whatever it is. So you can allege undue hardship in those cases. Questions about that? I feel like I got it. There's a strict timeline there. Once you get notice that somebody has applied for paid family medical leave, you either have 5 or 10 days. But I want to say 5 just to be careful. Days to allege undue hardship, so you need to do that quickly. I said 5 and it might be 10, but if you get to it sooner, that's great. I've helped you, right? I can look it up. Okay. Now I have to come to you and tell you that I have created confusion. I've just been clearing up things that other people, I would say, have created confusion on. This one I have created confusion on. School board members. Do people pay their school board members? So I have answered this one a couple of different ways. And I'm sorry. School board members and their pay is probably covered as wages under paid family medical leave. There is no exception for elected officials. So you probably owe the premium of 1% of wages on school board members' pay. I find this to be really weird, and part of the reason I answered this incorrectly the first time is that for all purposes of every employment law, if you have a school board member who applies to you for paid family medical leave, no. What, they're not an employee. What do you mean? What do you mean? They're not an employee. For these purposes, wages are defined incredibly broadly, and there are only certain folks. It's basically like any money that ever came into your pocket ever, unless you're a contractor. Or, if you work for the railroads or the federal government, and a couple of other exceptions, elected officials don't fall into that. So school board members pay, whatever it may be. I mean, some people are paying $10 a meeting. You owe 1% of wages on that $10 a meeting. Sorry.
Well, part of the confusion is that in the very beginning, it was the state that was saying, consider it like unemployment.
Yes.
It's eligible, you pay unemployment. And that's when people leave. None of us pay unemployment on board members, so they confused it right from the get-go.
Thanks. You're making me feel better. Because I said the same thing, right? And they actually do still have references to unemployment, but when they issued the regulations, they defined wages more broadly than what the unemployment folks defined wages as. And that's where it cleared up this question about school board member pay, and it just was not obvious to me or anyone else I work with that that was going to capture school board members. And so, you know, I don't have a perfect answer for how you fix that going forward, but, you know, I think you probably owe the premium on whatever you pay school board members is what I'm telling you, based on the way the wage is defined. Make a judgment call about how you want to handle that situation if you have not been, or feel free to give us a call. We can try to figure it out. But I think there is a penalty if you don't pay the 1% of wages on time, right? And so I'm hoping that what they would do here is say, oh, you didn't pay that for the first, 5 quarters or whatever it is. And this is only if you're using the state plan. If you pay like $10 a meeting, even if you have a ton of school board members, the penalty on that should not be huge. It is 1% of wages is the penalty, but it should be 1% of wages for that group. I hope. I'll make the pitch for you because I confused you. They confused us. It's their fault. Okay. Finally, and everyone's favorite topic, top-up. So, to say what top up is first, right? I'm gonna back up a little bit and tell you that the state actually had on their website, if you had gone to it, this little calculator where you could put in how much money you made and the state would spit out a number of how much your paid family medical leave benefits would be. They have changed the website. The calculator is gone. Don't know what it means, right? I noticed it was spitting out, I think, the wrong number for a couple of weeks leading up to it being removed, but they then redid the whole website. So you can't do that. I, this morning, made a spreadsheet. This spreadsheet would probably make all the people in this room cringe. It is pretty rudimentary, but I did the math, and I think the math is right. So this is what I'll tell you about the numbers, is that someone making $31,000 a year or less is getting 90% of their pay. And by the way, this is all based on the state's average weekly wage and the family medical leave formula, which is that the first 50% of the state's average weekly wage they get 90% of, and the second, anything above that, they get 66% of. So if you're making $31,000 or less, you get that 90%. Once you start making more than that, so nobody's getting more than 90%, and then everybody who's making more than $31,000 is going to get less of a percentage of their regular pay. Someone making about $50,000 a year is getting about 81% of their pay. At $85,000 a year, actually at 83, you start to hit the state's average weekly wage. That is a cap on the amount that you can get paid. It is currently $1,198 and some amount of cents, but the state is rounding up. Just throwing that out there. So $1,199 until July, when the average weekly wage will be recalculated. If you're making $83,000 a year, you will hit the average weekly wage as a cap, and you cannot, if you're making more money than that, go over the average weekly wage cap. So at $85,000 a year, somebody's making about 73% of their pay. At $100,000, they're making 62, and it's just going to go down from there. So if we have our friend making $50,000 a year and getting about 81% of their salary, then 19% of their salary they are not getting through paid family medical. Are you or are you not going to allow them to make themselves whole by using their sick time and other benefits through you? This was an option. I still think it remains an option, right? And we have told people that it is worth bargaining over. The law says we can't force people to use their PTO while they're getting paid family medical leave. It's in a weird section. So if you put it into your bargaining agreement, I'm going to say that you probably can. You've not forced them at that point. They've bargained over it, and they've agreed in bargaining to use their paid benefit. Some folks have successfully been able to say that you're going to take a half day every time, and I don't care if you're getting 81% of your pay, I'm docking you a half sick day every day that you're topping up, but you're also only getting 100% of pay. That's a negotiation point. You have to bargain over it in order to get that to work for you, but it's something I think sounds pretty good, right? Otherwise, what you've got is our friend making 81%, and they only need 19% of their weekly wage in order to make them whole for that week. That's about 7.6 hours if they work a 40-hour week. Are you going to let them take 7.6 hours? If they take 8, they're making more money on paid family medical leave than if they were not on paid family medical leave. So, that's been a negotiation point. A few weeks ago, the Maine Department of Labor updated their FAQs, their fun question and answer for employers, and they now have language that suggests they think that you need to allow top-up. They think it is, they essentially say there that you need to allow people to use their accrued leave. They say in accordance with the law and your policy. So in theory, if your policy says we don't allow it, I think you could still say we don't allow it. But remember our friend earned paid leave allows people to take leave for essentially any purpose for up to 40 hours. I think the state has a pretty good argument that at least 40 hours of top-up has to be allowed. But this language that they put in here says and really implies that you should be allowing top-up. Now, really helpfully, they've also added language that says, but don't overpay people. by no means should you be overpaying people. You should try to make sure they don't get more than 100% of their pay, but you should allow them to take the leave. I don't know. This isn't an FAQ. It's not in the law. It's not in the regulations. And so unless you're denying people the use of EPL, I'm not sure the state has any business asking you about this. But I want to flag it for you. Yes.
So with the topic, does it say that, so like if, because we don't know yet how we're gonna sign up with the state, so does the topic say that, is there anything saying we have to pay the top up at that pay period when they would have earned it, or can you, there's nothing about it?
I can read you because I have my binder. What question 78 on the FAQ says. Okay, here's what it says. How does PFML relate to an employee's accrued pay time off? It says you can't force it, right? And then it says an employer must allow an employee to use accrued time to top up, consistent with the PTO policy and applicable law. An employer may choose to simply pay employees the amount to close the gap without the employees having to use PTO. So, hey, good news, if you want to just close the gap and not charge them, we're also fine with that. PFML will not reduce benefits paid to an employee for top-up payments or PTO usage. But PFML is not intended to lead to situations where workers end up with more money in a week than they would have gotten while working. Employers should make sure that the amount that they're topping up, or the amount the employee is getting via PTO, combined with PFML benefits, does not add up to more than an approximate estimate of the amount they would have earned while working. Make sure you don't overpay people. So I don't think we have a great answer, but remember, an employer must allow an employee. That's the language they're going to find if they look this up. So I'm not sure. And I don't know if the state is going to tell us how much they're paying people. I don't know that yet. People ask me questions about the portal, and I don't have my own portal because I'm not you. And so I don't know what the portal looks like, or if they'll be sort of like, I know like unemployment sometimes will tell you if you can have a little web page, but I don't know if the portal is going to tell you how much they're making. Yeah.
Have you read anything about the communication between the employer and the state? I mean, what if the employee just goes ahead and applies and doesn't bother to really tell anybody?
So they're obligated by law to notify you, I think within 5 days, 5 business days of having received an employee's application for benefits. But then they take Good Friday off, so like what would they do? I don't know. Today a business day? I don't know, right? So I'm not 100% sure how that will work, and keep in mind also that paid family medical allows people to apply after they've already started their leave for up to 90 days, or after that there's a really good reason why they didn't take it before. So I don't 100% know on that, but I should know more in May.
September 30th?
Yeah.
I'll just throw it in. So I got my first email saying that an employee had applied right on April 1st at 12:38 in the afternoon.
Amazing.
There it is. So I log into, we went to the state thing, so you can see the difference. But I log into the Paid Family Medical Leave portal. There's a link in there to go to. It was hard to find the link. So then I go to the AFLAC portal, and there's nothing. I'm expecting once I get onto the AFLAC portal, it's going to say Susie James, case 12345. No, there's nothing on my home screen. It's like it's a dashboard, reporting, forms, there's all this stuff, and there's nothing. So I take the code from the email and paste it in the search bar, and her name pops up with the reason for leave, says that this employment application needs to be filled out. I can't find them. I cannot find the form I'm supposed to fill out. I love this. I knew this person was going to apply. They're on maternity leave. She left work on March 30th and said to me, hey, what about PFML in May? Because I wouldn't be back to have my baby by then. And because I'm sick every time I come around, I have no sick time saved up.
Okay, so it's going great, is what you said.
of right now, the system has some issues with different costs we're gonna work out, but problems I made, and so again, this happened on April 1st.
And they're off today, so.
The email that I got saying, hey, you need to log in and do this, and this, was a do not reply at 1 o'clock. So I found those two things, and I sent them a direct email and said, hey, information, I can't find the forms. I've not heard anything back, so.
And they're closed today, that's
Yes.
good for.
And they're closed today, which I don't know if it counts as a business day. I'm looking at the undue hardship right now. Okay. The employment was at 10 days. It's 10 days for undue hardship, but still do 5 just because. But so if you're gonna claim undue hardship, right, you only have 10 days after you receive notice of the leave. And so hopefully they're gonna fix this or be more flexible about the undue hardship piece, because that's, I don't know what to do with that, right? Hopefully they'll clean that up before May 1st, but I think the application portal opened on March 30th.
31st.
Yeah, 31st. So, you know, I'm gonna give them a little bit of grace because that's not a lot of time to get it fixed, but I wouldn't have been taken off the Friday the first week that this was open. How much are we paying for that? Anyway, no opinions there. Yeah.
Curious if your colleagues have heard anything about how the unions are recommending their people strategize the balancing of the two leaves. Like, are they saying take them both immediately, take only the PFML to preserve your sick time, take only your sick time and leave the PFML for later? Like, have you guys heard anything about what they're advising?
I have not. I've only seen what I've seen at the bargaining table, which is that they are absolutely not removing sick leave banks, for example, and they're still saying they're going to use them. So that's a lot of time. So as far, I think probably the order of operations for most people will be to take the paid family medical leave first, because why not, right? And then if you allow top up, great, and if you don't, fine, right? I think people are going to get grievances if you don't allow top up and you've not talked about it, right? Because that's not really, well, first of all, now maybe the Department of Labor would weigh in on that because they have this FAQ saying you must allow, right? But for the most part, that's a question about how you allow the use of your leave. And so I've had people ask me questions like, you know, if somebody's taking leave to care for their sibling with a serious health condition, that's not usually how we would allow sick leave to be used. Do we have to allow sick leave for this purpose? No, I don't think so, right? Paid family medical leave doesn't by itself change the rules that you have about the use of your leave. Same with the increments that you allow use of leave with. It's just that if you change things in the way that you're doing, you know, if you essentially deny those things, I would expect to start getting grievances over them. So you'll probably be dealing with paid family medical through grievances just as much as you will through this fun interaction with the state. Yeah.
So in that situation of somebody's taking PFML to care for a sick sibling, and your policy does not allow use of sick leave for a sibling, but they want to top off, how would you do that?
So how I would do that, and I'm answering this as me right now, which may be different than me in May, just saying. Me right now, I'd be saying first 40 hours are probably flexible for EPL, depending on what our EPL plan is there, right? And so we may not have a right to deny at least 40 hours of top-up for EPL purposes. For after that 40 hours of EPL is gone, I'm sticking to my policy. If my policy says this is not an allowable use of leave, it's not an allowable use of leave. Even if we otherwise allow top-up for allowable use of leaves, I think we can deny it there. So even if you allow top-up for the employee's own serious health condition, or to care for a spouse or a child with a serious health condition, you don't have to allow it for these other purposes. The safe leave, the grandparent, whatever it is that goes outside, I don't think you have to change your policies to comply with paid family medical. Yeah. Here.
So I have an employee on FMLA, and we only have like 5 all our time we use that for and then she applied for sick leave. So she doesn't have to apply for sick leave. So now that's she got approved for sick leave. Don't worry about it.
Yep. So, did everybody hear that one? We've got somebody with an employee who is going out after April vacation. She doesn't have any time after a few days, so she's already preemptively applied for sick bank and been approved for sick bank. So why would she take paid family medical? I wouldn't, right? You're already getting paid. There is language in the law that says we can't force people to take paid family medical leave before they take their other benefits, but
They can take it at the same time.
they can take it at the same time. Yep, they can. Yeah, and in fact, the state has specifically said that if they get paid from you through some other program, that does not reduce their paid family medical leave entitlements. But I think we will have success with the unions if we say, no, like we're not going to actually allow the use of the sick bank where we know somebody is also getting paid family medical, because we're not going to pay more than 100% for people to be out on leave. And that one, I would make the union fight, right? Let's not play that game. And if you're going to play that game, we're going to get rid of the sick bank. We have to get rid of the sick bank.
Do we have an employee apply for sick bank or apply for the amount? We don't have to
No, you don't have to.
advertise that that's.
You don't have to. And in fact, one of the ways that we can control for this,
Postage that we.
and one of the ways I think we can control for this is if we're negotiating now and we can't get the sick bank out altogether, which I've had very limited success with, only in places where the sick bank was not used for 20 years was I able to get it out. So I'm not sure that was a huge give on the union's part. But I have one success. Okay? I don't know if anyone else in my office has one success, so just when you talk to Tom and Mike, let them know. So what I think you can do when you change your sick bank language is that you can add language that says you are not eligible for the sick bank until you've exhausted your paid family medical. And the reason why that's allowed is because sick bank is our benefit. So we can say, we're not going to give you this benefit unless you've exhausted all other possibilities. That's okay. So I would think about adding language like that to your sick leave bank if you can't get it out altogether, which, again, not a lot of success there. Yep.
So we had a meeting the other day to sort of strategize about the fact when we get to the point where we have the people out on these leaves and they are not actively receiving payroll, and what do we need to be careful about in collecting the deductions for all these benefits that they're still getting? Is there anything that we need to be aware of about how we go about collecting that? Our collective sort of thing was to say, okay, when you go out on this leave, we're going to invoice you for said benefits.
Yeah.
But in the event that you don't pay us the value of this, we are going to collect it in the first paycheck that you come back. Is there things we have to watch out for?
So there's always a question about taking a deduction that's not authorized in writing, right? It's generally best practice to get in writing if you're going to deduct from somebody's pay for any reason, for you to have that in writing. But if you sent them a letter saying if they don't pay for it themselves, you'll do it when they come back, I would probably take that risk that they've seen it, they acknowledged it, send the red receipt, do what you do. It's not as good as if they sign something saying, yep, I understand, and I'll pay it when I come back. Now, of course, that leaves you with a little bit of a risk if they don't come back, right? And so one other option, although not a great option, and one that, depending on the circumstances, may make you look like the Grinch, is that you can cut people off from health insurance. When I'm doing that, I send a couple of warnings, right? I say, right when you go out on leave, you're not getting paid for this, and so you need to pay us by X date if you want your health insurance. And if they miss it, I send another one like, hey, maybe you didn't hear me the first time, but this is your health insurance, right? And if you want to keep it, you need to call me or you need to pay it by such and such date. And then if that date comes and they still don't do it, I still try to give them a call. I've tried 3 different times. But if they don't, you are allowed at that point to kick them off of the health insurance, put them on COBRA. You are allowed to do that.
Even though the law says you have to maintain your health insurance at the level that they have before,
That's correct.
because they're paying.
Because they're paying a portion. If you're paying 100% of health insurance, you're not going to send this letter.
But if they pay the 20%.
That's right. They still have an obligation to pay their portion, otherwise they're not meeting essentially the eligibility for that. Yep.
To go back to her
statement about someone taking sick bank. The sick bank is still gonna count as FMLA time.
Yes.
So like, they'll use up part of their weeks on FML, even though it's not PFML at that time, she could earn her.
Exactly, except remember that some of the private carriers are not asking that question. They have said that they won't ask the question about how much leave somebody took in the year before. So you need to know if you fall into that category, because then that doesn't help you. Yeah.
So at the webinar that we had last week in private and they talked about these scenarios with educators where if the qualifying event starts like August 1, that time frame for school wouldn't count if it was like June 1st. They get to run it all the way. You speak a little bit about like the rationale for that and where that comes from. How do people, like if you are going to top off, do you top off for days that you're going to be working if that's the problem?
That's a great question. So this relates to the rules about FMLA, right? And the whole purpose, remember, of this law is to take leave from work. And so this is true under federal family medical leave now, which is that if you have somebody whose job doesn't go year round, in the school, like in the summer, they don't have FMLA counted against them because they weren't scheduled to work at that time. And there are special rules depending on how you count your time for, like if you count by days and there's a whole day off, you can, you still, whatever, right? There's special rules there. But if you count by the week, even if you have one day off, you can still count the week, basically. But the rule is generally, like, we don't count time against you where you're not scheduled to work. And so if you have people who are taking leave, or they give birth, or they have surgery, or whatever it is in August, that's probably not counted against them because they don't need leave from work. I don't know how the state or the private plans, I don't know why they would pay people for that, because they wouldn't be paid for that if they were not otherwise, dealing with whatever they're dealing with. And so I wouldn't think they'd be eligible for pay, and so I wouldn't think that we would allow them to use sick leave either, right? We don't allow you to use sick leave on a Saturday because this week you'd like to make a little extra money. We don't do that. So I don't think we would allow that generally.
Yeah, maybe I've heard that wrong, but I felt that they said one scenario was it starts before school and that doesn't count. The other scenario was it starts when school's in session and runs beyond. So that was like two different things.
Well, but for example, right, like if you have somebody who takes leave today, then when you hit April vacation, that week doesn't count against them. So they get 13 weeks because they weren't scheduled to work on April vacation.
We were in the same call. I heard the same thing.
Am I saying something different than what they said?
Yes.
Well,
we were on the call with Guardian.
Yeah.
And they basically said if they're already on leave and summer kicks in, they're paid throughout the summer, even if they normally would not be. But if they apply during the summer, they don't qualify until they actually would have been scheduled to work.
All right.
Which is bizarre.
That is bizarre to me as well. But it's one of these things where you can, under a variety of circumstances under paid family medical leave, get paid more than if you were not.
But in that instance, we could say, even though the private plan says you get paid in the summer, we typically don't allow top-up on a day that you're not scheduled to work, so therefore we're not allowed top-up during the summer.
I wouldn't allow top-up for that. Yeah, I would not. I mean, and certainly you need to check to see how the person is paid, right? Because if you have these sort of people who are doing the pay averaging, or you pay your teachers over the summer, like that might affect this as well. But some of the private plans are doing things that are a little wonky. I actually don't know how the state is going to deal with that either. It's possible the state will do the same thing. Well, we've approved the leave for 12 weeks, so they're getting paid for 12 weeks. It's possible. I don't know yet.
Can you dig into that for us?
Yeah. I would love to. Take family medical leave expert, and I'll come prepared to answer it next time. Yeah.
Do you want to get into the weeds on pay averaging and how that would? I mean, because to be honest with you, when I look at those wages versus what they would be making in a week, if they're being pay averaged, it goes right out the window.
I do not know how private carriers and how the state plans to deal with pay averaging. I don't know.
So I'm pretty confident that with paid averaging, they're earning whatever they earn over the time that they are actually working. And we're just holding back wages, we're creating a liability for us. And so they've already earned it, and we're just paying them out their own money, like we're doing pay averaging, and it's doing else, it's not.
Sometimes it works out funky, but
I've had, in webinars, the state, it's been stressed that PFML went currently with FMLA. So if the FMLA gets paused over school break, it seems to me that the PFML would also pause during school breaks.
yep, I would agree with that. Yeah, and I will say, they did finally acknowledge in a more recent version of the rules that there are some times when FMLA will not run concurrent with paid family medical. And remember, there's a federal Department of Labor opinion letter that stems from COVID that says if it doesn't qualify for federal family medical leave, you can't run federal family medical leave. And so if I take leave to care for my sibling with a serious health condition, I am not qualified to take federal family medical leave. If I have not worked for you for 12 months or 1,250 hours over the last 12 months, I am not qualified to take federal family medical leave. So there are times when you will not be running it concurrently, but
you'll be running Maine family medical leave along with paid family medical leave.
I think so. I think they're allowed to say their other unpaid program always runs concurrent, even though, keep in mind, Maine family medical leave also requires 1 year of service. I think you can just assume the state's not going to ding you on that one, but be careful about the federal government because the feds will ding you on it, and they've written opinion letters about it as well. Yeah. Yeah.
There is an IRS rep ruling 2504 about the tax treatment of PFML.
And there's like a 20-page guideline document from the PFML folks about taxes, and I didn't read it.
The IRS has a nice little table.
Yeah. So, and I don't plan to, just to be totally honest with you, but Chris has. So if you have questions about it, Chris Stevenson is a great resource. I'm sure your other folks are a great resource. Don't ask me about taxes.
There's a nice table that summarizes the 20 pages at the end.
Oh.
Jump to that.
I'll think about it. Okay, well, I think I'm at my time. But it was great to see everyone. I'm sure I've answered all of your questions, and I relate just great. Anytime, we're here, ask us questions. Everybody at Drumwood for this habit to talk about paid family medical leave stuff. Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Is that it, Sherry? That it? Thank you, everybody. Oops, that's enough. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Wish you all a happy and healthy weekend, holiday weekend.